Fate, Souls and Singularities by Mundatorem Chapter 133 to 135. Chapter 133, A Wrong Call. The Chaldeans had opted to rest not long after the dragon, the servant who called herself a call, had departed. Not that anyone would blame them, the sheer size of the creature had certainly blown what little moral they had out of the water with the reveal. It was a giant in every sense of the word. With its body composed of what looked like solid stone, there was no way that things should even have been able to move, and yet it had done so. The fact the servant could have unleashed that upon them at any time during the fight but didn't because she was testing them, was something that burdened Olga's mind as well. Especially because she was left with the question of what she would do when the servant wasn't testing them and did intend to fight them for real. The director sat upon the roots that Torin had grown from the earth, the plantation serving as a makeshift bench for the meantime, but that would be about it. It was certainly better than sitting down in the snow, that much was certain. She raised up her sleeve, activating the communicator. What was the assessment of the servant? She asked in a toneless voice. She could already tell the news was going to be bad based upon her own experience. Munier's grimace greeted her. The man adjusted his glasses as he leaned forwards with his hands on the desk. Analysis of the servant before the deployment of their noble phantasm placed them as weaker than the lancer you encountered a few days ago. He started off with, the news prompted a raised eyebrow from the woman, but she didn't interrupt. Her class also seemed to be registered as a caster, although she didn't do much in the way of spell casting. That earned Siu's attention. The druid hummed before he pointed towards Torin as he worked to make sure all the Norse were comfortable. That guy is a caster as well, and he swings about a big axe. They chucked about fire, so must be the only class they can get summoned in. Munier nodded. That was one of the theories we had discussed, as that she was a combat caster. Perhaps also using some manner of spell on herself to keep up. At least that was before she turned herself into a dragon. He muttered before shaking his head. The sudden jump in magical energy and the necessity to invoke a name leads us to believe that the servant deployed their noble phantasm. Nero nodded her head, her fingers still touching her crooked nose and frowning heavily as she pulled them away. Seemingly more concerned with her physical appearance than she was with the discussion at hand. I do not see how a servant could possess such an ability as a mere spell. She deployed her noble phantasm and didn't even use it to attack us. Olga muttered out. Her hands tightened their hold on her trouser legs. She was right here. The servant who claimed to be making all of the wyverns was right here, and we let her escape. I don't know if getting blindsided by a giant dragon counts as letting someone escape. Siu huffed quietly, smirking as he scratched his cheek. Way I see it, we actually lucked out there. Olga whirled on him with a scowl, opening her mouth to speak. We didn't lose anyone. We kicked her ass so hard that she had to use her trump card, and then she ran away before we could resume kicking her ass. Siu pointed out, raising his fingers consecutively with each point he made. Chin up, master. We now know about another enemy we're gonna be fighting. How are we supposed to fight them though? She growled out, glaring at the caster. How are we supposed to fight a servant that seemingly doesn't feel any pain at all and can change into a giant dragon? Kill them before they can change into the dragon. Siu remarked with a shrug. I mean, you don't really want to get in prolonged fights with someone who clearly doesn't feel pain. Umu. Nero nodded twice as she pulled her hand away from her face. The many blows that landed upon her and the numerous wounds she sported by the end of our bout, in addition with her tough skin and lack of response, means that this servant clearly has high resilience. Marie raised her hand. Do we have anyone who can end fights quickly? If I had my spear. Siu trailed off meaningfully with an annoyed frown on his face, then nodded to Olga. But we can't get him over, can we? The white-haired woman looked down, causing Marie to send a scowl towards the caster. Not that we need two of you right now, the queen remarked as she moved towards Olga and parked herself on the bench next to the woman. We would need a way of subduing them before they could activate their noble phantasm, wouldn't we? Siu pursued his lips for a few moments before he made a small smile. Actually, I might have something for that. He stated after a few moments. Using your noble phantasm is all about having enough magical energy. Turning yourself into a dragon is gonna be taxing on your reserves, and there's no telling how long that is gonna last. In a normal situation, yes. Olga closed her eyes. But the servant has a link with the Holy Grail, or their master is in possession of it, which grants her a near limitless supply of magical energy. There is no telling how long she can maintain that draconic form of hers without expiring. That was true enough. If the master had a huge supply of magical energy to give out and was backed by the Holy Grail, it would mean that the servant could use their noble phantasm for as long as they truly wished to. Unless, Olga thinned her lips, her eyes narrowing slightly as she considered something, we need to fight her master as well. Several heads turned to her in confusion. Director. Munier coughed into his hand. I realize that would be the regular sort of strategy in a normal Grail war, but with what we know of previous singularities, the master here is almost certain to be another servant that we might not have encountered. What if they turn out to be more dangerous? Olga almost wanted to laugh. More dangerous than the hill-sized dragon? Whether that remains true or not, we need only fight them. Olga stated as she made to explain her reasoning. If it is a servant and they are engaged in battle, they will also need their magical energy. No matter how large their power source is, the servant can only expel as much magical energy as their mana stat will allow them to. Cu slowly widened his eyes in understanding. Oh ho 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 ho. That's a sneaky little plan you've got there, lass. Marie furrowed her brows. I don't follow. The caster turned to her. Right, this servant would be using his own magical energy for two things. Themselves and the servant who has the ability to turn into a dragon. The dragon being the most expensive at the time. So if we are to fight both of them at the same time, then if the caster was to use her noble phantasm, she would have to do it quickly or risk draining her master, and if they're in the middle of a fight, that would be the worst thing to do. Marie maintained her confused expression, then turned to Nero to see if she had understood what was being said. The Emperor had a serious expression on her face, cupping her chin and staring at the caster with a look that could only be described as resolute. You mean to suggest a war on two fronts? Nero replied, turning to Olga and raising an eyebrow, keeping both sides unable to use their full power as it would risk drawing resources from their ally. Olga nodded her head once in affirmation. Brynhilder hummed, that is a viable tactic, however there remains one issue. She turned her head to Olga and thinned her lips, one I am sure you are aware of as well. The grimace on the director's face was all the info any of them needed, Munier nodding along through the screen. Even removing the noble phantasm from the equation, as a combat caster, that servant was certainly something menacing. He remarked with a shake of the head, scratching the back of his neck, saying nothing about the lancer you guys fought earlier. I don't think they would even need their noble phantasm to kill you, and if you're gonna be fighting 2 or maybe 3 servants at once, you'd have to divide your forces, and your forces aren't all that great. He paused for a moment before adding on, no offense. It's fine. Marie waved him off with an understanding smile. I am aware that I'm not a warrior servant to begin with, the best I can provide is support. Yeah, I'm armed with a stick and some fancy symbols. Cu stated easily enough. I've got a couple tricks to further weaken her magical energy though, so that would serve to better our odds, but that would still leave her absurd endurance. He frowned, that might be another sort of noble phantasm. Munier blinked, you think so? The readings weren't showing anything like a continuous noble phantasm activation, although her magical energy readings were sort of high, but I just assumed that was because they were a dragon as well. He shrugged his shoulders, turning his attention back to the group. They only started to spike when she brought out those big hands to start trying to punch with and stuff. So that might be a noble phantasm as well. Wouldn't surprise me. Cu grumbled to himself. Also, a call. I ain't never heard of someone like that before. He jerked a thumb at chest. I might not be the most well-informed guy on most shit, but I'd like to think that I would at least be aware of the lady who could turn into a giant dragon. That seems like the kind of thing people would write down. Olga slowly turned her attention towards Tarkus. You've never heard of them before, have you? She asked with a flat expression. Oh, no. Tarkus shook his head, leaning back on his hands as his legs straightened out from underneath him. He had not been exaggerating when he talked about his weakness to heights. The subsequent fall from being kicked in the gut by a call had successfully broken both of his legs. Though the knight didn't seem to let something as trivial as broken limbs keep him from being rather upbeat. Also, I noticed something really odd, Mr. Caster. Did you now, lad? Cu gave Tarkus a raised eyebrow. What did you notice? She kept avoiding your lightning. He pointed out, looking around to the others. The dragon lady used her hands to hit everyone else, but when it came to your lightning she kept using her flames to block it. There was a pause for a moment before he made a noise of understanding. I suppose it makes sense, dragons were defeated by lightning. Cu gave a slow blink. They were what? Did you not know that? Tarkus spoke in a surprised tone. Everyone knows that the god Gwyn used lightning bolts to defeat the dragons at the start of Everu. Right, You guys didn't have that, did you? He looked down to his legs. Sorry. I forgot about it. I was a little confused why you all didn't comment about it, but now I remember it's a different world. He fell silent, pondering something to himself before raising his right hand and waving it from side to side. I mean, I've also never heard of Miss Akal either. Don't be polite to our enemies. Olga rebuffed him with a shocked tone of voice. She's trying to kill everyone. But being mean to people in return just keeps making them be mean to you, at least that's what my mother says. Tarkus remarked in a perfectly innocent manner of speech, you should only chastise people for being rude. That is why I hit Miss Akal so hard during the fight. Because she was being a bad person. Woe unto Akal, then. Nero whispered to Marie, prompting the French servant to give a light giggle and playfully slap the arm of the Roman emperor. Olga shook her head at the words, dismissing them as irrelevant as she focused on Tarkus. They were felled by lightning, did you say? The man nodded his head. It's really common knowledge back home that if you're fighting dragons you use sunlight spears. He had the decency to pause as he looked away from her and scratched the side of his face, his helmet removed and revealing his slightly chubby features and messy dark hair. I don't know any miracles though, sorry about that. Nah. Cu waved his hand towards the saber, putting on a thoughtful face. He's got a point. The girl didn't care about anything else hitting her but made an effort to avoid lightning. Some sort of conceptual weakness maybe. He looked to the director and shrugged, worth a shot if we fight her again, I'd say. Olga nodded her head at that. That remains true enough. However, there are still other issues for us to be aware of. Least of all being our lack of effective firepower. She motioned to the servants they had. It has already been demonstrated that a single servant can match ours in combat. Probably, 'cause we were all getting in each other's way. Cu remarked with a shrug of the shoulders, pointing to himself. I'm not really gonna start throwing around all the big rune spells because that would just blow everyone up, and at the same time shouting out, hey, get out the way so I can start using big spells, is probably going to alert someone. So. The director thinned her lips, rising to her feet and cupping her chin. For the time being, we should continue to head north. She turned her attention onto where she saw Torin still speaking with the Norse. With luck he has been able to convince them to turn back after that display. Brynhildr stepped to her side, whispering to her, their warriors' spirits have been roused after watching you fight such a foe and seemingly scare them away. Olga did a double take. Scare them? They ran off on their own. They were just there to test us and then leave. Yes, but remember how they looked. Marie whispering in support of Brynhildr, the caster servant took a lot of damage in the fight and they did run off, so it does look like we won that. The writer paused for a moment before she continued on, as we are still alive, I would say that we did win that. Olga opened her mouth to respond, then paused and slowly shut it again. It was hardly like she could argue with that particular piece of information all that much. It hadn't been a defeat as they were still alive and had only suffered mild injuries. Broken legs for a servant was nothing. In return they had forced the servant to use their noble phantasm as well as uncovered a possible conceptual weakness. There were ways that could be exploited, there just had to be. Alright, Olga exhaled. Yes, she pulled the communicator up once again and looked at Munier, asked around Chaldea and, she turned to Tarkus, you said the gods fought the dragons, yes? Tarkus nodded his head. Olga snapped her attention back onto the screen, asked the servants from the alternate world, those from the time of the gods, regarding details on how they defeated dragons. Anything from them would be useful, provided we are even dealing with the same species. Oh, yes, Tarkus nodded his head. The stories always talked about the giant dragons made of stone and their scales that were impossible to break with anything except miracles. Quote. Oh, that's another one of those things I should have talked to you about earlier as well, isn't it? Quote. Sorry, Miss Animasphere. Just. Olga closed her eyes, counting to 10 in her head before she opened them up again. We will get the information from another source. Do not concern yourself with it further. She turned away from Tarkus' direction, then found herself staring at the all too pleased face of Marie, her expression scrunched up. What? Nothing. Marie quickly composed her expression, although her eyes still contained that knowing look. What? You're giving me that weird stare and it's getting on my nerves. Marie relented. I was just expecting you to be a little more annoyed with him is all. She whispered to her, making sure that Tarkus couldn't hear. Olga regarded her with a flat stare. I have simply come to know what I am working with whenever he speaks. If I were to become irritated at every mistake he made, then I would never know a moment's peace. Is that why you haven't tried to correct the spelling of your name? Marie raised an eyebrow. Olga sighed. That was one of the first things I gave up on trying to fix. She admitted quietly, crossing her arms over her chest and drumming her fingers along her coat. The eyes closed as she realized something, pulling her hand up to cup her features. Lancer will be down here soon, won't he? Oh, will he? Marie's expression turned jubilant. I'm looking forward to it. He's really inspiring, isn't he? I heard he has an exercise club in Chaldea. I might just join it. She exclaimed, smiling widely as she did. What about you? Olga was about to tell her that, no, she most certainly would not be, before she paused and slowly thought back to touching her toes. There was something about proving that Lancer wrong and that she could touch her toes that was oddly cathartic to her. Her lips drew themselves into a thin line, her expression turning thoughtful for a moment. Her hesitation was swiftly noticed by Marie, who grinned openly at Olga. Something the director noticed immediately. Get whatever thoughts you're concocting out of your head. They are absolutely wrong. I'm astounded by how you can continue to, Torin growled, thumping the butt of his axe against the ground and briefly causing the earth to shake around them. Brynjar stumbled slightly, blinking several times before shaking his head and fixing the caster with a stern expression. After that display, I cannot see how. What I saw was you fighting a woman who turned into a dragon and then fled. She put my head through the ground. Torin gestured to his helmet. She broke my nose and broke his. He pointed his hand over to the direction of Tarkus' legs. Brynjar nodded along. Yet you still forced her to flee. She turned into a monster and then ran away from you. Torin reached up and placed his free hand over his face, growling into his palm before he lowered it again. Listen. No one here is a fool, Jarl Torin. Brynjar cut him off. With the way you all moved, we know we stand no chance against any of you, nor those you fought. He explained swiftly before the man had a chance to counter him, but from the very beginning, none of us were planning of fighting dragons. He scoffed at the notion, pointing at himself. Their babes gave us more than enough trouble, but that is what we're here for. Torin squinted at him. To fight the wyverns? Yes, because we can. Brynjar nodded his head. And while we fight them, you can fight the true enemy. We can do that much. The blond man shook his head from side to side. Your words won't dissuade me or anyone else. The possibility of death was always there, but with that comes the chance for Valhalla. The Millwood Knight sighed, throwing his head back and staring up at the sky. Fine, fine. He stated to himself before he looked back at Brynjar. You will not change your minds, even after what you saw. If that will not dispel you of this foolish notion, then nothing else will. I shall not waste my words further on this matter. Brynjar nodded his head. You have to respect our choice here, Jarl Torin. Would you so quickly give up your home? Torin barked an ugly laugh. That was the problem, we did not know when to retreat. Without elaborating further, he turned on his heel from the man and marched in the direction of the Chaldean group. He could see them assembled and speaking with one another about something. His eyes zoned in on Olga as she spoke with the French rider, the former looking rather agitated while the latter looked incredibly amused. Torin personally didn't know what there was about this situation to be amused about in the least. Chief Olga, he called out as he closed in. The woman in question turned to him almost immediately, her expression turned somewhat defeated as he drew nearer. They intend to stay, don't they? She guessed with an exasperated sigh, reaching up and cupping her forehead as her head inclined back. Marie at her side did not look at all surprised by the news, however there was a touch of saddened resignation about her features. I knew they would, Marie commented as she looked between the two of them. The love for one's country is a powerful thing, and even something like a dragon won't stop the willing from fighting for their homes. She gestured towards the Norse. It is more likely you will end up accidentally insulting them than convincing them to leave. The woman smiled. I know your intentions are good, and they know that as well, but they are determined at this point. Olga released a low growl from her throat but didn't say anything in response, her hands going to her hips as she looked towards the caster. Supplies. We're carrying enough for another day if we ration. Torin explained, easily sliding into the shift in topic, and that would be to ration heavily. Unless we find some method of getting more supplies to us. I will see what Chaldea can send in terms of supplies, that will be my concern. Olga dismissed easily, her eyes fixed upon the Norse. If they are going to be following us around without any sign of leaving, then having them do so in a fatigued state might well be sending them to their deaths. We still have a good deal of ration packs made for lengthened singularity. She suddenly cut herself off as she realized something. It's been 3 days for them. She shook her head quickly. They are in London, they can get supplies. She stated easily before returning her attention to Torin. Regardless, there are supplies that can be sent from Chaldea. Intriguing. Torin merely commented, dismissing his axe and crossing his arms over his chest. This tribe of yours can truly aid us in this way as well. HMPH. Naturally. Olga jutted out her chin in a rather prideful manner. If we could not even keep our operatives fed, then we would be unable to properly defend mankind at all. Torin grunted. In that case we need not worry about supplies for the time being. What we would need to concern ourselves with is the location of our foe's home. The man fell into a silence as he looked between the two of them. Well, Olga stared at him quietly before she pulled up her communicator, flashing it open and having Munier appear once again. Have you completed a scan of all of Denmark? Yeah, Munier nodded once. Even without getting into specifics, there are some pretty obvious readings to the far north. All of the wyverns you fought came from the north of Denmark as well, and all our information we have on hand points, well, north. He shrugged his shoulders, leaning back into his seat with a casual look on his face, so I would assume they would be north. If it's anything like France, then the roost of all the wyverns is going to be pretty easy to spot. Olga nodded and lowered the communicator, which means we must continue our trek north, and then once close enough, we can narrow down where we need to go. She explained to the caster patiently, then could tell what he was going to say. I am no fan of marching around the entire country, blindly looking for the Grail either, but there is little choice in the matter. Torin raised his hands in a placating manner towards her. As you say, the hands lowered, how long before you would have us set out again? About 10 more minutes, Olga stated after a moment of thought. Tarkus still needs to be healed up so he can at least use his legs, and it will give everyone plenty of time to get themselves calmed down before we continue onwards. Her expression turned questioning. How far are we from when we first arrived at your village? 2 miles west, more or less. Torin explained as he pointed in the stated direction. I had us move further from the coast when we initially started our trek. That and the town is likely already destroyed. Its location is now known to our foe, and predators will often return to sites where they know their quarry have been. In other words, going back there would be a stupid move. Something Olga understood and agreed with, considering that there was no guarantee a dragon hadn't burned all the village to ash anyway even without them there. Olga exhaled and turned back to face the servants around her. They had a half-hearted plan, so there was a good chance it would develop along the way. They had also discussed the possibility of additional servants being present in the Singularity as well. Or rather, Brynhildr had discussed the possibility of Sigurd being present, and that, right now, almost seemed like wishful thinking. A dragon slayer summoned in his home country, one of the most famous dragon slayers in history, and a singularity full of dragons. That would just be the best news in the world. Sigurd's whole body ached. He tried to hide it as best he could, but it was painfully apparent that he wasn't being healed as fast as he normally should have been. The dragon warrior had no doubt broken nearly every rib in his body during the fight. He knew he was tougher than that, which meant it was the effect of the mystic eye. Perhaps one that weakened whomever it gazed upon. That seemed the logical deduction to be made. But then there was the invisible grip around his body. Perhaps that was a spell the dragon used upon him. He was aware that dragon language had its own manner of magecraft to be used, so that might have been some manner of binding spell woven into the attack. It was pointless to debate the complexities of it at this moment. You're favoring your left side, Gordon whispered from his side. Sigurd's lip twitched upwards bitterly before he gazed at the knight from the corner of his vision. I realize that would be hypocritical of me to comment upon, but you are our best fighter. Does the weakness still assail you? Sigurd remained quiet for a moment, then looked over his shoulder. The dragon's flight from them had given the people the wrong impression it had been fleeing for its life. While that wasn't true in the least, it served to mollify what would have otherwise been quite the terrible news. It is still upon me, Sigurd admitted quietly, turning back to the front and nodding his head slowly, fighting back another grimace of pain. It has lessened since the end of the battle, however. I believe I shall soon be free of it. Calamate, Gordon whispered the name to himself, shaking his head and coughing again as he used the spear in his hands as a walking stick. He had borrowed one from the spares they had. He would never have even humored the idea of using the sword on his back for anything like that. The Black Dragon, you know of them, Sigurd stated. Might I ask for the legend? I confess my own ignorance in such a story. It is no surprise, given the difference in worlds. Gordon explained, though the stories of Forasa still speak of the war at the birth of the flame, where the gods and their silver knights waged mighty wars upon the everlasting dragons. Sigurd pointedly looked over his shoulder before looking back at Gordon. Leto is one such knight. It would explain the reaction. He was going to withhold judgment on the Silver Knight. By all accounts he was a warrior who had served at the command of his king, nothing more and nothing less. It would, by the end of the war, there were only 2 notable survivors of the everlasting dragons. Seath the Scaleless, whom many believe was born at the advent of Flame and Calamate. The Black Dragon of Chaos, or so the stories went. Gordon continued on, the dragon lived for many years during the reign of the gods. The glowing eye upon its head made all attempts to slay it pointless, though the 4 knights were never said to have attempted the slaying. Sigurd frowned, a survivor out for revenge? No, his goal seemed to be more than simple revenge. It was strange to even hear them speak. Gordon confessed, the Paledrake founded the sorcerer school so I would know of them, but all stories portrayed the Black Dragon as some manner of savage brute. Fafnir was much the same. Sigurd confessed with a shrug of his shoulders, the dragon was no fool, smart as any man I knew. Yet they were motivated by their own avarice, they were an evil dragon without a doubt. He pursed his lips, yet when the dragon Calamate spoke, I sensed no malice in his words. Nor was there any sign of falsehood. Had it not been for the arrival of Leto, I suspect we would have parted without violence. Gordon looked at the knight, though his helmet disguised his expression. Sigurd could feel the disbelief coming from the knight. Without malice. He means to slay or banish all the humans from their homeland. I did not say his actions were without brutality, merely that his motives were more selfless. He wished to build a kingdom for his people. He raised an eyebrow at Gordon. Can you say that trying to do such a thing is truly evil? The silence of the opposing knight stretched on for a few seconds before shaking his head. No. Forasa expanded through conquest, it was our way of life. To call another evil for such a thing would be to confess my own people as such. I do not make claims that it was noble, but kingdoms were birthed on conquest and empires grew through it. To slay and take strength, that was the way of the world. This will not change my stance though. Sigurd stated in a determined voice, the dragon Calamate must still die, but that does not mean that I will ignore his desires. We are merely on opposing sides, but that does not mean I shall despise him. His eyes closed, he is merely doing what he feels is best for his people. Given the near future that awaits the Scandinavians, it is not as though I can pass judgment. Gordon tilted his head, so why does it concern you? Learning of the motivations of your opponent allows you to learn of them as a person. How they might fight, Sigurd explained. During the battle when he was enraged, Calamate relied purely on raw strength. There was little skill to speak of in his blows, and it speaks to him as a person. He is naive, lacking the experience of dealing with others. He frowned. Though given what you have just told me, it seems to be unsurprising. Then your speaking with him was also to learn of his way as a fighter. You can learn about your foe before the battle even commences, just as you can learn of your foe when battle has begun. It is a matter of examining them. Sigurd raised his hand. It means that he shall be exponentially more dangerous when we next battle him. Gordon nodded his head. If we encounter him once more, he shall be more determined, and unlikely to be blinded by his hatred. He will battle us with more care. Even during his anger, he still utilized his mystic eye, and the results speak for themselves. Sigurd let out a quiet breath. It might be best to utilize my noble phantasm upon him swiftly. However, he did not utilize his own noble phantasm during the battle either. We would have no way of knowing if it can counter yours, and he has magical energy he can spare. Sigurd confirmed. I could use Gram at its full might perhaps once and be able to move around after that for a short while. If he were to somehow survive that, even unlikely as the possibility is, he trailed off, but he did not need to complete his words. The both of them understood the full consequences of that. A noble phantasm was a trump card to be used to settle a match quickly. With Sigurd's as powerful as it was and without a master to support his existence, there was little doubt that even if it killed Calamate, he would not be able to maintain his being for much longer after that. Which meant they would have to consider that possibility as a final resort unless the situation changed. On a lighter note, Sigurd coughed into his hand, looking to Gordon with a raised eyebrow. What did you make of Lady Alsana? Gordon blinked behind his helm. What do I make of her? She was rather silent until earlier, and she said she emulated her king. Sigurd pointed out, Smiling lightly to himself, it is clear she values him a great deal, and the manner in which she spoke was rather commanding, was it not? I would suppose. Gordon replied unsuredly with a half shrug. Having not met her husband nor spoken with her at length during the time she has been here, he trailed off meaningfully, then looked over his shoulder to the woman in question. Still riding atop one of her shadow cat mounts. Her aura is off-putting, is it not? There is indeed that point. Gordon admitted with a nod of the head, turning to face Sigurd once more. I am also wary to avoid the giant cat. That is a greater concern than the queen. Sigurd snorted at that. Yes, they do seem rather fearsome, do they not? She has not yet told me how the other one is faring after it was injured. His lips curled down in worry. It would be upsetting if the wounds were grievous, though they did not appear so. They look to be the size of a dragon. They are smaller than Fafnir, but they are large and quite the powerful companions. The saber pointed out with a smile. For allies, they are indeed the wonderful boon. Though they lack the stealth to catch a servant by surprise. With their size and power, I very much doubt that they require stealth. Yes, but as Calamate demonstrated during the battle, he was quite the counter to them. Sigurd grimaced, and with the same divinity coursing through their souls, there is no doubt that they hold no distinct advantage over him. A troubling development, and as a dragon he would stand at the top of phantasmal beasts. Even as a servant his magical energy might have been below that of Fafnir, yet that makes it all the more dangerous. Is that high? Gordon could not help but ask. You speak of Fafnir with great worry. Were they a powerful dragon? He gestured to his head. Tyr offers me some wisdom on the matter, but they are names and faces, the contents are lost to me. Fafnir is possibly one of the strongest dragons, Sigurd explained. With servant containers, we are often weakened or strengthened when compared with our original selves. I suspect Calamate was weakened given his origin. To still have such high magical energy even after that, he sighed and shook his head. There is no use in debating such negatives, however. We should be confident in our victory. Gordon looked down at the limps they both sported and then away. If you believe so, he muttered vaguely. Then jolted his head as if a sudden thought had come to him. His left hand came up to his helmet chin and cupped it while he hummed quietly. Wait, how far can the beast travel from her? Sigurd raised an eyebrow. What do you intend? Scouting parties are a habit here, are they not? Gordon inquired. Would it not make sense to send one of the beasts on ahead to investigate the land along with a servant and then return? The Nordic saber put on a thoughtful frown as he reached up and adjusted his glasses. That does indeed hold merit, though for any locals that remain at this distance, they might become rather concerned by the appearance of a large tiger draped in dark shadows and with burning red eyes. He pointed a thumb over his shoulder. It took our own group many a day to get used to it simply lying down. Few approach it even after we have assured them of its benign nature. That is why I suggested a servant, although most of our number has some manner of divinity that would alarm the beast and make for a poor partnership. Sigurd nodded his head with his eyes closed. We have only two whom might be able to travel with it. The Lady Alsana and Eric. The latter is a berserker who will be unable to speak in the presence of women due to his wife's influence. Provided she does not outright kill them for speaking to him. Gordon trailed off. They had inferred that much from Eric himself during later conversations. It would appear that Gunhild was truly possessive of the man, to the extent that she could curse even servants for daring to speak and or approach the berserker if they were of the opposite sex. A useful tactic in battle. Less useful for when you were around allies. We cannot be without Lady Alsana's aid. Gordon shook his head. We means we might indeed have to petition Eric to travel with them, as long as the queen is amenable to the request. He paused for a moment. I would suggest you speak with her. Not yourself. No. Gordon shook his head. I am still ill at ease around her, I confess. The man looked down. It is through no fault of hers, merely my own fear and discomfort. His left hand pressed against his chest while his right tightened its hold on the spear. I suspect I shall find some manner of recovering from it, but for the meantime it is simply being around her gives me a sense of unease, as though something prickles my skin. I feel the same way. Sigurd admitted with a half nod, but I still make the effort to entreat with her. As well you should also. She has proven to be a capable ally and it would serve to bolster our unity if you were to speak with her. He reached out, placing a comforting hand on the shoulder of the knight. Worry not, brother-in-law. I have every confidence in your safety. Gordon looked to the limb, then back to the knight before he exhaled. If you say so. He spoke in a resigned tone as he slowed down and turned around. I will adhere to your advice. You should not force yourself. No. The Forasan cut him off with a shake of the head. You are correct. My actions have been somewhat dishonorable towards her. She has done no wrong and I have responded with disrespect. I shall make amends to this. He turned back to Sigurd. I will speak with her on this matter of scouts and return to you. Sigurd smiled at him reassuringly, giving a single nod of the head as he turned to resume his trek forwards. All the while, Gordon moved further back the line and passed by the refugees around him as he zoned in on the large shadow cat that Alsana rode. As he drew closer, the woman turned her head to look upon him with her usual cool features. Gordon felt the hairs along the back of his neck stand up on end and the strong feeling to sharply turn away coursed through his body. He bottled down that feeling as he closed in. Also doing his best to ignore the giant tiger that briefly turned its head towards him and made sure to expose the fangs that were the size of his leg. That was somewhat disconcerting and very nearly as terrifying as he found the woman to be at times. Perhaps that was the point of it. Alsana clearly noticed his discomfort, moving her hand to the back of the cat's neck and pressing her palm against it. No, Lud, I shall allow it. Gordon withheld his sigh of relief as the cat retreated its gaze from him, focusing once again on plodding along at a rather gentle pace. Not too fast so that it overstepped the refugees but not too slow that it was outpaced by them. You approach with questions, Alsana stated from atop her mount, looking down at Gordon as he walked by the side of the beast. Speak them, I shall answer. Stealing his nerves, the saber worked to start speaking. We were curious how injured your second companion was, the one who fought the dragon. Zalin is still wounded but they are not crippled. Alsana dutifully responded. Your next question relates to their well-being. Gordon did not deny it. Yes, myself and Sigurd came up with the suggestion of sending both your tracker and Eric out as scouts to report back to us. Though it would depend upon your own opinion at the time. Alsana remained silent as she debated it. Her expression betrayed nothing and the silence itself went on for longer than Gordon was comfortable with. Least of all because the extended quiet meant that woman maintained her gaze upon him without changing her features once nor making a move to speak. The suggestion of Eric comes from your unwillingness, I would assume. Alsana merely commented, no doubt having seen through why they suggested the berserker. He lacks the light of yourself, Sigurd and the knight Leto. Such marks upon your soul would be disrupting to my companions. That is what we determined, yes. As they are, Gordon looked at the cat and swallowed. They do play on my nerves, I shall not deny. If only because he didn't think he could lie to this woman. That would similarly be disrespectful. I see. Alsana nodded along. Zalin is not fit for battle, but should the task remain that of scouting I shall prove my generosity and fulfill my obligation as defender of these people. He shall be put under the care of Eric, should he similarly agree to the proposal. Though if he is to encounter the citizens of this realm, I shall withdraw them both. Gordon nodded in understanding. That is agreeable. There are conditions. That was not what he wanted to hear. Conditions, you say, naturally. You are here to request a boon from a queen. Did you expect it would come without reparations? Alsana looked at him as one would look down at a child. Gordon would be lying if he said the thought had not crossed his mind, but all his dealings had been with fellow knights. He had not once truly dealt with royalty to any meaningful degree, not even with nobles of higher standing. What manner of cost does this request take from me? Gordon asked slowly. Not that I am unwilling to pay it, he hastily added on, merely that as you well know, I am ill-suited to being able to afford a boon from you. That is for me to decide. Alsana cut him off, her lip quirked upwards for a split second before it returned to one of apathy. And the cost shall be paid simply enough, provided you are able to stand in my presence long enough. What is it you would ask? I wish to learn of the homeland my husband came from. Alsana stated after several seconds. You are a knight of Forasa, are you not? My husband did not boast of his own achievements and my duty to Elaim Lois bid that I did not leave the kingdom. Therefore, I shall hear from you the land of my husband. Gordon blinked behind his helmet. Forgive me, I did not know your husband hailed from my homeland, though my own stories will be from second-hand experience. He admitted, tales of our kingdom from better days. I was born mere decades before the kingdom fell to ruin. It is no matter to me when you were born, I shall hear your legends regardless. She paused for a moment, then spoke in a slower and almost gentle tone, and I would ask if you have heard the name of Ermengild before. The Sword of the Dawn. Gordon spoke quickly and in surprise. I had not thought you would have heard of him, but I suppose even beyond the borders of Forasa the man was a true legend. Perhaps more so than the great General Lothian, though they served during the same period of time. The knight spoke, oblivious to the expression Alsanna was making, though Sir Ermengild was a knight unlike all others. He chuckled. It would not be remiss of me to say that he was perhaps the ideal image of a knight. Is that so? Alsanna sounded a touch amused. You admire this man greatly then, do you? Of course. Gordon responded without even a hint of hesitation in his words, though tales of his exploits would be rather long-winded. I have time, Alsanna remarked with a wave of her hand. Consider this the cost of allowing you use of one of my king's gifts. If all she required was for him to just talk to her about tales of knighthood, then he could at least allow that much. It was fortunate for him that it was a topic that he was similarly well versed in. Telling the tales of legends many times his betters did not dissuade him in the least. Rather, he always considered it somewhat inspiring to him, a story to compel him to try his absolute hardest. That and it was nostalgic, reminding him of the times where he was told those stories himself by his uncle. Akal hadn't been expecting a welcome when she returned. No, that wasn't quite right. She had been expecting Artoria to be waiting for her, though that would be by pure coincidence on part of the knight. With precious little else to do until Calamate commanded otherwise, Artoria had been relegated to a patrol duty. Akal imagined that if the situation did not change soon, then the Lancer would start to get somewhat antsy. A knight such as her could only remain idle for so long, and at present it was hardly like the Arctree needed much in the way of protection. No, what Akal wasn't expecting was to find Calamate standing near the entrance to the Arctree with his arms crossed over his chest and clear signs of battle all over his scaly hide. Slashes, cracks and holes covered his body. His eyes fixed themselves upon her as she approached, landing down upon the ground with a thud and retracting her summoned wings. Calamate looked her up and down, noting her own rather generous battle damage as well, which could likely compete with his own. Her left arm was still unmovable. There was likely damage to her shoulder bone, and she could tell several of her ribs had been shattered, with her knee being in a rather bad way as well. The pair of them stared in silence at one another for a good few seconds, the black dragon eventually speaking. Artoria said that you went out to find the humans she encountered. He uncrossed his arms, gesturing to her up and down. I would assume you did succeed in finding them, given the manner in which you return. His maw curled down, his voice dropping into a more curious tone. Did you slay them? Akal debated how best she could answer this before she decided to go all in. I did not. As you can see, they proved more capable than I had expected them to. Which was true. She tried to keep the pleased tone from her voice as she explained that. It might end up giving him the wrong impression. Understandable. Calamate nodded his head once. The humans I did battle with were fearsome as well. He rolled his jaw from side to side, along with the knight adorned in silver that traveled with them. That brought the woman's thoughts to a grinding halt. Silver Knight, here, indeed. Calamate shuffled, looking away from her in an almost ashamed manner. His words had me become rather infuriated. He closed his eyes and exhaled, and then there was the Sister of Dark. The sister of who? And then her words gave me pause for my purpose. He closed his eyes and exhaled, Akal internally blanched. Did she miss out on what she had been expecting to happen? Wait, but he said they gave him pause. His posture might have changed, but it seemed more subdued than previous, not at all like he was despondent as she had been expecting. What manner of pause do you speak of? She claimed that my actions were no different from the gods. He stated simply. Akal grimaced but did not reply. And the lack of surprise on your face tells me you knew this as well. I did. I see. Calamate reached up and clasped the front of his face. I am. You're smarter than I am, wiser. Like Artoria, you know more things than me. He admitted as he lowered his hand. So I guessed that already, before you came back. Does that concern you? Artoria said I might concern myself with the vision of my people later. As a king, my first duty is to keep them safe. He stated, clenching his hands into a fist. I fight for my people so they might one day have dreams of their own. For the time being, Artoria said that my dream was the most important. Akal nodded her head. It was sage advice if a little simple. Though she doubted Calamate would fully appreciate the complexities of a political climate and differing agendas. Well, Artoria had been present while she was gone. Was this what humans called envy? She was a little let down. She had missed out on her chance, but the shift in character more than made up for it. That explained his posture, if only a little. So that is what I intend to do. Calamate declared, clenching his hand into a fist. even if it makes me no different from the gods, I shall with my entire being for this ideal of mine. I had determined as much, but now it feels correct. No. It feels right. He scrunched up his snout, as though he was having difficulty articulating the words. It is hard to speak of, but it is. The manner in which you feel is nothing short of pure. Akal surmised for him, as though this state of being is the only one that exists and there is no other, rather this is the only path you can see yourself traveling down. Yes, that is it. Calamate nodded to her. Perhaps my motives do not matter to the humans, but they matter to myself, and that is something I can take confidence in. He declared, pleasing as it would be to have the humans acknowledge my dream, it is not for them I am doing this. It is for yourself. Yes. Another nod. To that end, when you work on birthing the next generation with wyverns who have arms, I would like for you to make them more like me. Akal raised an eyebrow. Like you. The ability to think and speak, so that they can actually understand what I am doing. Calamate declared, even if it will take generations before the effects are realized, I want my people to at the very least know what I am doing, even if they are only doing so because I am telling them to. And this is different from now because they will be aware. They will know that I have their best intentions at the core of my soul. Calamate pressed a hand over his heart. If they know that, if they can understand that and entrust themselves to me. You don't need to say anything more. Akal smiled at him, shaking her head and holding up her right hand to stop him. An eyebrow was raised at the larger servant when she noticed his gaze fix itself suddenly upon the extended limb, his eyes focused on it rather intensely. What is that you hold? Akal opened up her palm. Ah. This was knocked from the leader of the humans. Her name was White Flower. She showed off the metallic disc in her grasp. She saw the taller dragon's look of confusion, or as best as he could generate with that face. White Flower, Calamate repeated slowly, reaching towards the metal disc and taking it between his finger and his thumb, careful not to crush it in his grasp as he dropped it into his massive palm on his opposite hand. Do humans normally take their names after plants? Akal shrugged. Some of them have been known to do so, but I have never heard of one quite like that. I see, so you met with the leader then. What was she like? She said she fought for humanity's future and was leader of some kingdom called Chaldea. Calamate was still for a few seconds, then looked from the construct to Akal. She fought for the future of humanity, you say? Quite so, she smiled. So that is why you were interested in them. Am I becoming transparent to you now? No. Calamate shook his head at her, then returned his attention onto the disc and brought it closer to his face. It just seems like the sort of thing you would do, is what I meant. He leaned his head to the side. What is this? I am not sure. Akal shrugged, walking past Calamate and towards the entrance of the arctree. I just thought it looked interesting. I shall retire to heal and then begin work on your new subjects. She paused for a moment. My king. Calamate responded with a hum, though his focus remained upon the small device in his hands. He continued to examine it, looking closer and seeing that upon the surface were a great deal of smaller circles, some of which had different colors to them. Or dulled colors at least. He brought up his clawed hand, extending a finger towards one of the buttons and pressing it. The disc lit up, each of the buttons flashing with green lights, save the larger disc in the center that was red in coloration while a circle near the top of the disc was blue. He blinked several times, then paused for a moment. The red light seemed more appealing and it reacted when he touched it. His finger halted just above it before he reached down and touched it again. Leonardo da Vinci was hard at work trying to find some method of communicating with the London Singularity. She would be lying if she said she wasn't worried. Between the lack of communication for 3 days and the readings they were receiving that seemed almost too good to be true, the universal genius would admit her own suspicions on the matter. Though that is all they remained at this moment, suspicions. She was confident in Fujimaru and Mash's abilities to protect themselves. They had cleared 3 singularities at this point, not to mention that they had several other servants with them as well. Although, there was something about Ash, something that Romani and the Saber were keeping to themselves. If it were another time than right now, she probably would have pressed them for information on the subject, but that could wait until they had resumed communication with them. A small part of her was thrilled by the seemingly impossible challenge laid out before her, a larger part of her was troubled by it. Unlike in the Rome Singularity, there didn't seem to be any reason for the disturbance. And if Fujimaru had not yet attempted to establish communication with them, it meant something was blocking them from their own side of London, which meant their initial guesses were wrong. The genius was never wrong on something like that. So it meant that someone clever was down there and not just the sort of clever that was haphazardly tossed about. Someone actually clever was down there. That was a worrying prospect. The lack of communication with Chaldea meant there was a very good chance they were not allies. Which meant this required her full attention. Her communicator started blinking next to her. Her eyes briefly flickered away from what she was working on and towards it. It was coming through on the priority channel, so someone apparently wanted to talk with her desperately. It might have been the control room, but she had left that up to Pharaohs. The woman was capable enough. With a gentle sigh, she put down her tools in her left hand and reached over to press the button without looking at the screen. Ciao, Chiamant, she spoke in an upbeat tone to hide her slight stress. You've reached the workshop of the resident genius. How can she help you on this fine day? She expected a response, then frowned when she didn't get one. Turning her head towards the screen, hey, I put my soul into that greeting, the least you could do was say, she trailed off, blinking several times at the screen. The thing on the other end blinked in response. Its head was arrow-shaped, the snout thinned out the further it got from the face and horns jutted from the back of the crest-like skull. The head twisted and she got a glimpse of a glowing eye through the screen as it stared at her up and down. The head pulled back and granted Da Vinci a better look at her unusual collar. Well, Leonardo blinked, then crossed her arms over her chest. Who might you be? The eye blinked once. Calamate. The voice rumbled from the other side of the communicator. I was not expecting this, they spoke further. Just out of curiosity, where did you get this? The disc. A call said she picked it up after the Chaldeans dropped it and fled. Calamate paused as if considering something, then tilted his head at Da Vinci. Are you one of the Chaldeans? She placed her hand beneath her chin. And if I said I was? Calamate hummed thoughtfully. Would you be willing to talk? Talk. Leonardo did quite well to hide her surprise at the sudden question. And what would you be wanting to talk about? She looked over him once again. He had fairly draconic features, and from what she had heard, the singularity involved wyverns. Yeah, it was clear that this individual was an enemy, and yet he wanted to talk. There was a distinct lack of aggressive boasting as well. I would like to know what this is, Calamate said, then reached for the screen and pushed his finger through the hologram before he withdrew it, staring at the limb. I cannot touch you. Are you some manner of ghost? A ghost? I have heard of them but never seen one. Calamate replied, his voice betraying his obvious confusion, but they all had stories of being untouchable. I believe, though I might be mistaken. I am not a ghost, Leonardo informed him, leaning back into her seat and raising an eyebrow. Suffice to say, what you're holding is just something that lets me talk through very long distances. She grinned. I designed it myself, you know. Made to withstand all measures of stress and damage. She paused for a moment. Don't test that though. Calamate's expression was hard to discern, though that might have been as a result of his inhuman face. You made this small metal thing. If you want the technical name, it is the Advanced Communication Disc, or the ACD, for short. She boasted with a proud smile. Even in front of the enemy she would never lose out on the chance to boast. A.C.D. Calamate replied slowly before shaking his head. You made this to talk with others without being close to them. I did not know humans advanced so far. There was something in his tone that Leonardo picked up on instantly. Oh, she grinned, you sound impressed. I am. He didn't deny it in the least. I am wondering if my own people might one day make something like this. Leonardo leaned forwards, inclining her head at the dragon. And just what is it you hope for your people? I'm taking over this land so that we dragons have a home of our own. Calamate explained easily, watching the woman's reaction. Leonardo blinked once before nodding her head several times. You have no words for it. Well, I can't say I was expecting it, Leonardo admitted with a shrug of her shoulders. The last time we fought dragons and wyverns, they were burning and destroying an entire country at the command of someone out for revenge. Was that their only reason? Yep. A quick nod of the head was his response. Oh, his tone was clearly disappointed in the answer. Does that bother you? It's just that, what is the point of destroying everything? He replied with, removing the old to build something new is, well, that is something I am still coming to terms with. But to destroy everything and leave it as a ruin seems to be a waste. Leonardo turned back to her tools and resumed her work. Are you making something else? Calamate asked with intrigue. Leonardo almost laughed at how much like a child the rather imposing dragon sounded. that innocent tone in his voice was almost charming. A shame he was an enemy in the Singularity, but he understood that as much. She thought so at least. You do know we are enemies, don't you? We are opposed, yes. You fight for the future of humanity, I fight for the future of dragons. Calamate simply stated, we have opposing goals, but I do not hate humans, though if you would not speak with me then I shall not speak with you. Well, I'm not going to tell you what I am working on because that would be a little revealing, wouldn't it? Leonardo looked to him with amusement. I'm not asking you what you're building. I'm cutting down trees to make my own Camelot. That time, Leonardo did pause. Your own Camelot, yes. Why are you telling me that? She looked to Calamate with obvious confusion, something that prompted a blink from the dragon. An equal exchange of information. I tell you what I am building and you tell me what you are building. He tilted his head. I would very much like to know. I have never built things before, so I think that speaking with you will let me learn. Oh ho ho ho, an up-and-coming inventor, are we? Leonardo grinned more openly, but I still can't tell you, it's supposed to be a secret, but it will let us talk to our other friends that are in danger elsewhere. Oh, that makes sense. You are worried about your brothers and sisters. If mine were in danger, I would be concerned as well. The dragon hummed, inventor. That was the word you used, is that what you call someone who makes things? Yes it is. Leonardo nodded her head, turning back to her work and continuing on. She could multitask making the booster for the communications and speak with this unexpected caller at the same time. And you are speaking to perhaps the greatest inventor in human history. The one and only Leonardo da Vinci. She didn't get the applause she was hoping for. Are you famous among humans? Quote. Quite a bit, yes. I see. I am not human, so I do not know you. I have gathered as much, yes. But you claim to be the best inventor. I don't claim so much as I know. Calamate hummed in response, the best inventor, can we speak further? Though I suppose we are enemies. Well, I am a little curious about a dragon who fancies himself an apprentice inventor. I suppose I can spare a couple minutes. Especially since you managed to call me directly, although I suspect it was by accident. She paused for a moment, though I hope you understand I am rooting for you to lose. I would be surprised if you were cheering for my victory. Calamate honestly remarked before he frowned, though the scaleless one did. No, never mind. He dismissed and looked back to the inventor. So, you make things. And, yep, Calamate talking with Leona and all the fun stuff. Anyway, you will be happy to know that in the next chapter, the two groups are finally going to meet. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Chapter 134, A Long-Awaited Meeting. Eric has set off with the large cat. Leto explained to Sigurd as he got close to the knight, falling into step with him. Another thing of note is that Gordon is still speaking at length with Pygmy Alsana. Sigurd smiled lightly at the news. The fact their conversation was still ongoing after so many minutes was something that was rather pleasing to him. It was always a good day when allies could find the time to sit down and talk with one another, and considering Gordon had been somewhat hesitant to do so, it meant the pair of them had found something they shared similar interests in. That is good news. Sigurd quickly schooled his features. On another note, there is something I wished to speak with you about. Is there? Leto couldn't contain the surprise in his voice before humming. I suppose we have not had much of an opportunity to speak with one another yet. He chuckled. You frequently left to find more humans to rescue and I ensured that they were protected when you returned. The knight sighed. If I am to be honest, I was somewhat jealous you got the opportunity to leave. Sigurd paused for a moment. You are? Another nod of the head. The chance to wander an entirely new land is always something one should take advantage of. To explore the sights and to sample the different cultures. He gave a light-hearted laugh. I am always one for new experiences. A hand was raised to Sigurd. Not that I would abandon the people in order to go gallivanting around the countryside while they are besieged by wyverns. That would be the most disgusting behavior. The dragons were something I wished to speak with you about. Sigurd used the entry point to get his question in, as you clearly have experience in fighting them, or those of your order do. I was curious if you had anything we might use when our next battle arises. He explained, though I am not often one for trickery, I will admit its uses from time to time. More than that, any advantage you could offer would be welcome. Leto fell into a silence. The knight scratched the base of his helmet and produced a metallic grinding noise as a result. Sigurd watched the movement with a blank expression, waiting for the knight to speak up again. I fear that anything I could offer would not be valuable at this time. He confessed after a few moments of tense silence, his voice shifting into being rather serious, through no desire to weaken our position, but I am simply unsure if my own experiences would be of aid considering what has occurred here. Sigurd frowned. Oh, Calamate is, Leto sighed, as the last of the ancient dragons. Calamate survived the war against the gods, although I suspect that was, in part, due to the actions of the firstborn. Though we are forbidden to speak of them. Regardless, it was in the later years where the ancient dragon came into contact with the abyss. The abyss, the pygmy Alsana, it is the strength of her own soul gone awry. Leto explained, trying to articulate it. Such an event is not as uncommon as you would have expected. A similar matter occurred in Izalith and gave rise to the demon race. He quickly shook his head. That aside, I noticed it during the battle that the dragon's scales are different to the other ancients we fought. Sigurd frowned, a result of the divinity within him. The div what? Leto did a double take. Ah, you refer to the dark soul. He grunted in affirmation, but to answer your question, that is indeed what I refer to. The everlasting dragons we did battle with were susceptible to the strength of miracles. Great bolts of sunlight could cleave their scales from their bodies and render them defenseless as a towering dragon could be. He added on with a slight chuckle. A lone eyebrow was raised by Sigurd, the only notice he gave for the berserker to continue onwards with his story. Yes, the strength of miracles and the bolts of lightning were a weakness dragons shared. Leto's voice shifted into one of uncertainty. Although with the power of the dark soul now fueling his existence, I am uncertain that the strength of miracles would be a weakness to him any longer. Sigurd pursed his lips. The soul that assaults all other divinities, you believe it would counteract divine powers? It could certainly counteract my miracles. Leto admitted without a moment of hesitation nor a hint of shame, though I have little care for them and less skill. I much preferred to utilize my strengths where they lay and leave the hurling of powers to my betters in that regard. The power of a god are one with their blood, however. He teetered his head from side to side, that I am less sure about. However, the point is raised that this Calamate is now a hybrid between human and dragon. A dragon with the essence of a pygmy, I would suggest instead. Leto corrected, so he might no longer be weak to the power of sunlight spears at all. Sigurd cupped his chin, defense against a conceptual weakness, or perhaps overcoming said weakness, he muttered to himself, then nodded his head and looked back up. Thank you. This has been most insightful, it perhaps more dire news than I had hoped for. Worry not, Leto boasted, slamming a fist against his chest, I much prefer the more direct approach. I could tell by your choice of weaponry. Sigurd chuckled, a warhammer of that size must take a great amount of strength and as much skill to wield efficiently. Leto paused for a moment. You believe so? Many other knights likened me to the fiend Smo. Though perhaps that might be because there were few who would ever be willing to acknowledge that the executioner had skill far and above the likes of we silver knights and just shy of the 4 knights of Gwyn. The berserker pondered aloud, though the comparison troubled me as well. Smo was infamous, I assume. Sigurd raised an eyebrow. What did he do to become so poorly looked upon? He was a cannibalistic torturer. I see. Sigurd's expression turned sour. That would indeed affect the opinions of those who were around him. He nodded in understanding. I can understand now why you would be troubled by such a comparison. I merely ignored them. I likened myself more to Bishop Havel. Leto exhaled loudly, crossing his arms over his chest as he walked. I strongly believe his aid would be most welcome. Though he might be a tad more inclined to chase down Calamate than to continue our mission to escort these humans to safety. Sigurd scrunched his eyebrows up in thought. You mentioned him before, during the conversation with the Calamate. His lips thinned, he would prioritize his own hatred. Havel despised dragons more so than any of us. Leto explained with a shrug, not that it was a difficult matter, but it was still notable. He hated the pale drake Seath and all that came from him, so his opinion on sorcerers was equally low. That being said, when I last spoke with Havel he seemed subdued, perhaps resigned to something. He shifted his stance and tapped his chin with his index finger, so perhaps he was letting go of his hatred in his later years. At any rate, worrying about such things now will not aid us. Sigurd dismissed with a shake of the head, turning his attention away and falling into a silence. He pursed his lips before he opened his mouth to speak. Forgive me if this seems intrusive, but what is your opinion on the ambition of Calamate? The dragon. Leto sounded surprised for a moment before he grunted and waved his hand in dismissal. They are free to do as they wish, I will not be concerned with their ideal one way or the other. All that matters is slaying them. That is a more carefree answer than I expected. I am merely doing as I see it is my duty as a knight. The dragon is a danger to all, so they must be slain. That is simply the way it is. The motives and ambitions they hold will not change what I have to do, so I will simply put them from my mind. He nodded to Sigurd. If you wish to continue thinking about the dragon, then you may do so, but I will not comment upon it because, well, it is not something I can comment upon. Very well, I was a touch curious. I suppose I phrased it wrongly. In a different situation I might be a fair bit more interested in it, but in the current situation it does not truly matter to me. Leto spoke in a casual tone of voice. The dragon wants to conquer, so they should expect resistance from those already living here. We are all aware of our part and there is nothing else to be spoken of. That much is true, I suppose. I'm not doing this because it's my duty as a silver knight to kill dragons though. Leto hastily added on, because I just enjoy doing what I want. Right now, I want to protect the place I was summoned to protect, that is all there is to it. I am a little saddened that I won't be able to explore this land, but I suppose I can let the knowledge I'm protecting humans give me some solace. Sigurd's lip twitched upwards at that. It can be a very comforting thought, can it not? Cu had Olga standing not far from him, the girl in a basic stance with a stick and a shield in her hand. All right, so, while those guys are over there getting run ragged, Cu jerked his head towards the Norse, Leonidas standing in front of them and barking encouragements while they did star jumps. Olga herself would admit that the scene was rather bizarre, but if it got results then she was certain that the Norse weren't going to complain. They actively believed Leonidas to be an Einherjar that was brought down from Valhalla in order to aid them in their quest. The worst thing was that it was hardly like they could say he wasn't a warrior spirit who had been remembered forever in a distant hall after death. Because he was a warrior spirit, a heroic spirit who had achieved a place on the throne of heroes. It was disconcerting how easily they lies were being stacked on top of one another with just enough truth between all of them to string together a very convincing picture to those without the proper know-how. We're gonna be putting you through your paces. He clapped his hands. My teacher taught me to wield all sorts of weapons, so considering we probably won't have a lot of time, I'm just gonna teach you the most basic of basics, right? Olga nodded her head once, but didn't say anything. If only to hide the strain in her voice from just how awkward it was to hold the shield in her left hand. Her wrist had already started to shake with how much she was holding it up. Good. Cu grinned. First thing is first, get into a stance. Quote? Olga blinked at him, then looked down at herself before looking back at the caster. I am in a stance. Quote? Oh. Cu's smile melted away into an understanding grimace. Right, you've never done this before, have you? Worry not, caster. Olga withheld a sigh as she heard the boisterous voice of Nero approaching her. I know enough to position her correctly. You do ya? Cu sounded incredulous, crossing his arms over his chest. How come? Imperial privilege, Nero explained simply, which had both the servant and the master blink once before they made noises of affirmation. That was indeed something Nero could use, granting her the skills that she so desired. It was probably why she was even a saber in the first place. Emperor Nero was famous for many things. Swinging around a sword that could burst into flames was most certainly not one of them. Now then, pale rose. Nero stopped by her side, looking her over and humming before she leaned forwards and grabbed her right arm before pulling it up and slightly backwards. Then angling her wrist slightly so that the stick was at a slight angle pointed away from her body. With a single nod, the emperor moved around her to the other side, raising the shield up and pushing it closer to the center of her body. Nero nodded once, then turned to Cu, there. Cu examined the director's stance at a distance, a thoughtful look crossing his face before he started to walk closer to her. He got to about 2 feet away, looking down on her with an indiscernible expression. Well, it does look the part, he admitted, nodding once to himself. There was a blur of movement, and the next thing Olga was aware of, she was staring up at the sky with a feeling as though she had been kicked by a horse. Wah, she panted repeatedly, her hand no longer around her stick and her shield lying at her side. Cu leaned over her, staring down at her with a half smile and a raised eyebrow. Although looks aren't everything, he nodded to the shield at her side. I'd get that if I were you. Anger flashed through her veins. What the hell was that? She all but roared as she shot to her feet. You. I pushed you down, yeah. You looked at her as if she'd said something stupid. What did you think battle training actually meant? His hands were on his hips, his expression puzzled. It means that we learn through experience. Take heart in the fact that at worst, you'll probably get a couple of bruises. I could have taught you like my teacher taught me. You remarked in a dull voice, at which point, that little shove I gave you would have been my hand burst through your back with your heart in my palm. The image was enough for Olga to blanch rather suddenly, all traces of anger gone from her body as the crimson-red eyes locked on her. Is there really a need to frighten her in that way? Nero scolded the Lancer in a swift rebuttal. We both know that Pale Rose is no warrior, so she cannot be trained as such. The Emperor turned to Olga. Though I am no trainer, so I confess that I doubt I will be much help here. Anyway, you coughed, pointing down, pick up the shield, first task will be blocking. He grinned, don't worry, I'll be exceedingly gentle. Olga scowled at him, then reached down and picked the shield up once again and left it out in front of her. Well, first off, she was looking up at the sky. Why did you assume I was going to punch the shield? You remarked as he stared down at her once again, raising an eyebrow at the girl. All I got to do is just go around. He shrugged. Try and predict where I am going to do that. Why, you're a servant, she blurted out with annoyance as she resumed her glare. Even if I could figure that out, you're still faster than me. You thinned his lips. All right, we'll go right the way back to the basics. He stepped back, waving his hand at her. All right lass, up, up. TCH. Olga loudly clicked her tongue as she got back to her feet, raising the shield once again. The palm of the caster struck the center of his shield and she found herself falling backwards once again. Your stance is all wrong. Again, she had the feeling she was going to regret this, if she didn't already, by the end of this training. If it could even be called that, it felt more like the servant was just using it as an excuse to wail on her and relieve themselves of some of their tension. With a groan, she was back on her feet and this time looked down at her legs. Eyes up here, you shouted out. Her head snapped up and she raised the shield to cover her own head. The fist of the caster lazily struck the side of her shield and twisted it with the impact. Olga stumbled back from the recoil and found the armament on the ground having been knocked from her hands. You placed a hand on her chest and shoved her backwards. The woman released a panicked gasp as she tripped up over her own feet and twisted as she fell, this time landing face first in the snow. Your grip was all wrong, it was too tight and didn't allow for enough flexibility. Despite her anger at him, she made sure to correct that next time. Too loose. The watched as the shield was effortlessly pulled from her hands and she was back on the ground staring up at the sky. Her lips curled down into an angered snarl, biting back a scathing remark that she had prepared on her tongue as she jumped back up to her feet. The caster raised an eyebrow at her, holding up the shield in his hand and almost showing it off. Want to go again? Give me back the shield. She growled at him. The caster chuckled and tossed it back to her. The woman stumbled as she grabbed it. Her eyes still fixed on the caster, she slotted it back onto her arm and held it out in front of herself as she adjusted her footing to try and provide herself with some sort of stability, one leg in front while the other was behind. Then you just shoved the shield and she slipped forwards, falling down onto one knee. You're not about to run a race. You ever see a warrior hold his shield like a distant sprinter? The caster shook his head. You're gonna have to tighten yourself up to get a better go if it. Don't put your leg too far back, slide it a little forwards and square your shoulders. Put your back into defending, not just your legs. Again, she grumbled under her breath. In this Renaissance, Da Vinci corrected with an amused chuckle, although Calamate could infer that it was not something she was doing to be offensive to him. It was the period in which the entire artistic culture of Europe went through a complete overhaul. Basically everyone was getting involved in reforming the arts. She paused for a moment, moving her hands away from what she was working on. Well, more like a period where people brought back the classics and made them even better. Calamate blinked once at her, then looked away and rested his chin atop his fist while his other hand held the communicator. Then paintings did not exist before this period. Oh no, paintings were most certainly a thing before that time, but it's during the Renaissance that I would argue they got better. A period of time characterized by the births of some of the greatest artists and inventors of all time. She looked to the screen and flashed the dragon a smile. I assume you know what period I was born in. I could guess, Calamate remarked with a nod of the head, still in a thinker's pose, but you could look to the past and bring it forwards to make it better. There's nothing wrong with learning the lessons of the past, be it either correcting old mistakes or even finding inspiration for entirely new ideas. Da Vinci explained as she moved her hand to another tool, still working on the device. You're doing something a little similar with how you talked about building your own Camelot, aren't you? That gave the dragon pause, his brows scrunched up. I am, looking at the past and finding inspiration for my own kingdom, is what you are saying. He inferred, looking at the woman as she hummed and nodded her head. And what you were speaking of before, these paintings, what are they? Oh ragazzo. Da Vinci sighed quietly, then turned to the screen and fixed Calamate with a rather serious look. I'm gonna start talking about this, and when I do, you cannot interrupt me, alright? I will take questions at the end, and if I ask you something, just reply with a nod of the head or a shake of it. Can you do that? He paused when he saw her face, then nodded once. Excellent. Now the idea of painting was initially just something as simple as capturing the likeness of someone. Normally a portrait, now I suppose you could easily call that a frozen image upon a sheet of paper. You look at something, and then using colors you make a copy of what you see on a piece of paper. Nothing more and nothing less. A nod. She smiled. Now comes the Renaissance, and suddenly, you can change things up a little bit, and even after that time. Now paintings don't need to be so, I don't want to say boring, but a little lacking in creative flair. Don't get me wrong, they were skilled enough, but they lacked the vision of a true artist. Another nod. Suddenly, you aren't so restricted, and the vision can just flow onto the canvas. You can depict history how you interpret events to have occurred, bring the images of the past to life with your own visions. It's why there was a lot of religious iconography of the time period that represented famous events in Christianity, Adam and Eve, the creation of Adam, that sort of thing. A lot of it is artists expressing their vision on it. A much slower nod of the head. In truth he had questions, but the Da Vinci woman had made it clear enough that she would answer them at the end of the talk. Now, we could debate until the end of the world, quite literally, about whether or not all art is considered equal. The statement that truth is in the eye of the beholder is more often quite true. There are objective truths in art that the person who painted something like this was skilled. You cannot deny that the creation of Adam is a painting from a skilled man. It's just not possible. Calamate hadn't seen it before, so he still was rather lost. But it's whether you find the image spiritually beautiful, it causes your heart to beat a little quicker. If it takes your breath away and you know in your blood that this is beautiful. Something like that changes from person to person and is closely entwined with love. If the artist puts his love into a painting, then you can feel that when you gaze at their work. Whether you find it beautiful or not, you cannot deny the objective statement that the artists cared a great deal for it. She paused, noticing the blank stare for a moment before shaking her head. Basically, even if you don't like it, you can agree the person who made it did like it. Her lip twitched at the enthusiastic nod of the head she got from the dragon. Basically, art is now seen as something not just for depicting how a person looks, but for expressionism. It showcases how they appear to the world, how they are seen to the world, and the like. Da Vinci gave a more genuine smile. It becomes something that can be used to show the world a whole new interpretation of beauty. But the taste changes from person to person, you said. Calamate tilted his head in confusion. Then, what is the point? I'll let you in on a secret. An artist might create something and the masses might love it, they might also hate it, but to the artist, they didn't make it to be lavished with praises. They made it because they wanted to, even if they were commissioned by another person. What the artist makes, is what they wanted to make. It is their self laid bare for the world to see. She shrugged. If it is loved, great. If it isn't, then it is for the sole enjoyment of the artist and them alone. Then, it is something that can be enjoyed by everyone, but it still exists solely for the artist. Is the enjoyment of others coincidental? Da Vinci made a face. Well, if you're putting something out into the open, then the enjoyment of others is less coincidental and more the goal. Some artists will just go through the motions of making something and then just toss it out into the world without a second thought. They put the time and the effort into it, but not the soul. In which case, they haven't made art. They have thrown a bunch of colors on some paper to make it look pleasing to the eye. So this Renaissance was about expressing the vision of humans. Calamate guessed, tilting his head. No, it was about expanding it. Right. Da Vinci nodded her head. Right you are. Then it is another, So you paint to express yourself. Calamate muttered, cupping his chin. You put colors on something and it becomes art. Well, I wouldn't empty out tins of paint onto the floor if that's what you mean. Quote. I see. The dragon continued to scratch his chin thoughtfully. What else would you consider to be artistic? You said there was more to this, Renaissance. Ah, yes, the wonderful development of science, politics and architecture. Calamate understood none of those words. Although there was one thing he was curious about. You said you were born during this time, yes. At her nod, he continued on, did you also paint anything? She stared at him for nearly 10 seconds in complete silence, not a trace of emotion to be found on her face, and for a few moments he had believed he had insulted her. Then she burst out laughing, and it was not just any small chuckle he had heard from her previously. It was a complete laugh from her entire being. Her head was thrown back and her eyes were closed as the boisterous laugh continued to echo around the area as though she had heard the funniest joke in the world. During the time she was laughing, Calamate himself could do nothing more than stare at her in complete bewilderment, waiting until her laughter was dying down and she focused on him once again, wiping tears from the corner of her eyes. Sorry, it was just, I remembered you would know nothing about me and I realized you were being genuine. Calamate blinked once, then my answer. Ah, yes, she coughed into a fist, nodding her head several times, I am something of a painter, yes. What did you paint? Her smile turned more coy, her head inclined to one side, why don't you try and guess? I'll give you as long as you need. He blinked, guess, he muttered, frowning to himself, you mean you won't tell me? I'm curious if you understood my words so far, and if you understand what I would paint if I had the chance to. What would she paint? That was a topic he didn't really understand still. Her words on beauty were something that he still couldn't comprehend. What was objective beauty? Was it the same for humans as it was for dragons? Da Vinci studied his expression. Even through the screen she could still pick up his clear troubled nature on the question. You don't need to try and answer right away, I'll give you as long as you really need, or until my allies arrive at your home base. Calamate hummed to himself, a little pleased that he had more time to think about the subject further. There was something about the subjects the woman talked about that seemed appealing to him. The way in which she talked about creating things and taking inspiration from the past to make something better. Can I ask a question? Da Vinci raised an eyebrow before nodding her head. Considering I've been talking to you all this time, I think it's fair if you ask a few things of yourself. As long as you let me ask a couple of questions. You can. Calamate nodded his head, but, you spoke of beauty and inspiration from the past. He looked to her, which do you think is better? Something completely original, or something that comes from the past? Da Vinci hummed, rolling her jaw from side to side as she pondered the question. You're asking if I prefer original ideas to an idea inspired from something else. My answer would be they are equal. The dragon blinked, they are. Of course, there is nothing to say that something is more valuable because it never existed before, and something has less value because it comes from something else. Reaching up, the woman tapped her chin several times. If I were to give an example, it would be names. Names. Calamate spoke in surprise, why would you give that as an example? Well, say the first person to ever have the name Smith. Does that mean the original Smith is suddenly better than every other Smith purely because they were the first one with the name? What if another Smith later down the line created something revolutionary? Is he still inferior to the first Smith because his name is taken from elsewhere? Calamate opened and closed his mouth several times, well, no. He furrowed his eye ridges, his lip curled downwards, they are, Da Vinci nodded, now you see it. Something does not become more valuable simply by being the original, it's what a person does with it that counts. Like, the idea of a kingdom has been done plenty of times before. Are you suddenly going to abandon your idea of a kingdom because it's not original? Of course not. Calamate answered sharply before he saw the pleased smile, realizing what he had just wandered into. Yep, it's all in the eyes of what someone does. Of course, outright copying leaves a poor taste in my mouth, but if you aren't doing that then it's fine. Individual interpretations of the same idea. She pointed at herself. When I think of a kingdom, a whole litany of words and phrases spring to mind, and that's just because they've been done before. Despite the same ingredients being present, you'll rarely find any two kingdoms that are the same, because even if they all have the same titles, it's the individuals inside that make up the difference. Calamate hummed, My sister said no two humans are the same. And she's right. People think differently and come to different conclusions. You could put them in the same circumstances and they could come to completely opposite ends. That is just how they are. Da Vinci chuckled. Got a little off track there, but for my answer, in my eyes, it does not matter where the idea came from, it is how the person uses it. What is their masterpiece, so to speak? I don't know my masterpiece. I'd be surprised if you did. Da Vinci bluntly remarked, looking at him oddly. That would be a bit arrogant to say that in the span of a conversation you have gone from having no idea what you're doing to suddenly saying you've developed the perfect vision. You can have a good idea, but whether you can apply it is something else. It's not enough to have the creativity to envision a masterpiece, you have to be able to make it as well. She paused for a moment, then put on a slightly abashed look. Don't take this as me trying to inspire you, though. Calamate merely stared at her. Okay, good. Now the communicator suddenly started to crackle. Calamate furrowed his brows as the image suddenly cut out. He blinked several times and then looked down at the device in his palm. Da Vinci, he spoke out in confusion, moving his hand to the device and pressing the red button in the center several times, to little effect. Da Vinci, are you there? Magic energy swirled behind him. Calamate was on his feet a split second later with the device cradled in his hand and protectively held behind him while his other hand was extended outwards, yellow flames leaking from his scaled fingers towards the direction of the magical energy. Then he felt it, the slight pressure that seemed to surround his whole body. Whatever this was, it covered him and likely the entire area as well, almost like he was subtly being pushed inwards by the very air. The ground several meters from him started to fizzle and hiss. The snow crackled and burst as the temperature around it glowed. The earth itself turned the color of burnt orange with the area affected widening with each passing second. The ground churned, dirt was upheaved and melted slush washed over the area and across his feet as flames leapt from the ground. Calamate very nearly hurled forth a flame in the direction of the bonfire before a voice gave him pause. Be at peace, timeless one from before the birth. The voice gave the dragon pause. His hand was indeed stayed by the plea of the new arrival. The dragon looked down at the orange patch of flames and charred roots as they rose from the floor, swirling and interlocking with one another until they formed a shape as disjointed as the voice they possessed. A burning bush warped into the expression of an agonized scream, the singular burning eye locked onto him as the bush solidified itself. Calamate narrowed his eyes as the figure, not lowering the hand just yet. I come not to trade blows, but to exchange words. That got him to lower his hand ever so slightly. The flames around his knuckles dimmed in their intensity. You came to speak with me. Bringing out the communicator, he held it up for the arrival to see. You claim to do so, yet interrupt a conversation I held with another. The bush was silent, then gave a hum that sounded apologetic. I was privy to your conversation, timeless one. The dragon frowned. You eavesdrop then. A pause, yet you appear before me all the same. Why not speak your words openly? They are for you and you alone. Truth be told, I was loath to interrupt your discussion. The bush confessed, yet, the time of the end draws soon and the moment I might speak with you was in this one instance, no earlier or later. I will hear your words then, if this is the only time you can give them. Calamate aloud, nodding his head several times as he tilted his head at the bush. However, that would be as long as you respond to my own questions. The bush chuckled again, amused at the inquisitive nature of the dragon. The nature of the inquisitive mind is a wonder to behold, the birth of one who asks the simple questions of why. But not all knowledge is so freely given, when the question is posed. They must all be answered in time, through your own power, or through another's. A tendril of bark and embers extended from one of the pores, its tip pointed at the dragon. You understand this, else you would not ask the questions themselves. What is it that drives man? The answer they hold may not be your own, so you seek to fashion it. You speak of learning. I do. Calamate hummed for a moment, watching as the tendril retracted back into the main body. You came here to speak with me about why I learn things? The dragon asked with an odd tone of voice, his head tilted to one side. Ha. There was a time where I would have asked you many a question. I would have enjoyed watching your rise and the birth of your dream. A land built by dragons and untouched by the sin. The dragon's head straightened out. You speak as though my goal is somehow a spectacle. The birth of a kingdom is a spectacle, regardless of whom the sculptor might be. The bush remarked almost casually, it is nothing directed to yourself, but as we near the end I will ask you this one thing, do you fear death? Death. As I have died before, it is no. A misphrase. The bush rumbled with amusement, glowing eyes brightening as they focused on him. Do you fear the death of your dream? If you perish, your vision will perish with you. That would depend upon who slew me. Calamate admitted after a few moments, his breath leaving him in a slow sigh. If I were to be felled by one with similar vision to me, then I could accept that. Our dreams clashed and theirs was superior. I would lament it, but I would not regret it. I would have tried and I would have failed, but I believe it is worth the attempt, if that makes sense to you. Some would consider falling short of the final end to be the greatest tragedy of all, to leap over every hurdle and to stumble so close. Does that not trouble you? I expected it, from the beginning. It is a matter of equality to me. If I am to kill for the sake of my dream, then I should be expected to be killed for the sake of another's dream. The bush was silent for quite a while. Neither of the two said anything before it offered one final sentence. Then if you were to be slain not for the sake of an equal but opposing dream, but because one disliked your own dream. Calamate's eyes darkened. I do not believe I would accept an end such as that. It is one without respect. To kill for the sake of mere hatred is something that I am. He looked to the side. It is odd to comment upon it. I know I killed many for the same reason, anger and envy and nothing more. Perhaps I have not yet encountered the right dream. The Da Vinci woman spoke of a place where wyverns killed just for sport. If I had been there, perhaps I would feel differently on the matter. To be introspective of one's own hypocrisy is a rare trait, to learn truly from past mistakes and better oneself is another. The praise was genuine, though Calamate detected an almost pitiful undertone in the voice. I sought to create one who could peer beyond the cycles of light and dark, a race who could transcend this order of the world, not unlike your kind. Calamate was quiet for a moment. I cannot tell you of the time before the flame, not in the words I know. It was different, it was strange in every other word to describe disparity. Is it odd that words of comparison are used for a world without it? Poetic irony, one would say. The bush chuckled before the amusement faded away. To die out of hatred or simple disgust, you say. To have your dream mocked and ridiculed, trampled upon because your killer thought it to be repulsive to them. I cannot see any human accepting such an end, so why should I? You should not, was the simple but stern reply he received. You seek to change the fate of your people, to rewrite the story of your people, a true monarch you might have made. Might have, We will not speak again, I suspect, not like this at least. The bush explained, slowly retreating back into the ground, but indulge yourself in this world of resplendence for a little longer, though built on a lie, it holds some comfort for you. But remember, no matter how tender, how exquisite, a lie will forever remain a lie. When the truth is revealed to you, I hope you will not find yourself amongst the crestfallen. As the bush faded completely from view, Calamate felt the pressure around him lessen considerably before it vanished altogether. Hey, you didn't break my ACD, did you? The dragon raised up the communicator to his face, the screen flickering back on as Da Vinci reappeared. The woman blinked in surprise and sighed to herself. Ah, good. For a moment I was worried you accidentally crushed my precious invention. I would never be so careless with the creation of another. If I destroyed it, my actions would be intentional. Da Vinci raised an eyebrow at him, a wry smile on her lips. That isn't quite so comforting as you would imagine it to be. Calamate blinked once. Comforting? I was being serious. The woman rolled her eyes, her expression shifting to being more serious. So what happened anyway? I can't imagine you being the sort to hang up on someone midway through a conversation. She pointed to herself, making an exaggerated face of indignation. It was telling that even Calamate could tell she was not being completely serious, and to hang up on me of all people. Inconceivable. Though I would never end a conversation in the midst of speaking, especially not with you. I was approached by another. He directed his head back towards the pile of melted snow, though he did not give me his name and I do not know what he was. Da Vinci paused, inclining her head to the side. Oh. Tell me about this interesting visitor. They took upon themselves the shape of burning shrubbery and spoke with many voices. He saw the way Da Vinci froze, then her eyes suddenly narrowed in suspicion. Is that right? This is definitely getting strange now. You know them. Her head shook in a negative. Only through class. They call themselves Castor and have appeared to Fuji. She cut herself off, coughing once to clear her throat, to our allies twice before. In 2 separate locations at that. For a normal servant that would be impossible. I can be in 2 places though. Can you be in two separate time periods? Quote. No. Da Vinci gave a single nod of the head, and there we have it. Her finger tapped against the table. Still though, for them to appear in front of you, what did they ask? Many of their words were lost upon me, but their parting phrase, he told me to indulge myself in my world, made atop a lie. Calamite responded, looking at the woman in confusion, although I don't know what that means. The frown on Da Vinci deepened. I'm not sure. It could mean any number of things that we are simply not aware of. Still, it's useful to know that this servant can indeed move between singularities, although that in itself is a little concerning. Calamite shrugged. I would assume you to know more than me about this. But, what is a singularity? Da Vinci blinked at him, then gaped. Wait, you don't know what a... She cut herself off, her jaw clamped shut, and she looked at him somewhat oddly. You don't know what you're doing, do you? Calamite frowned. I admit I have only just come to terms with the process of kingdom building, but I would not consider it to be. No, not that. I meant... Da Vinci raised her hands, covering her face and sighing into them before drawing them down again. I suppose you will want me to explain it as well, also why there was no kingdom of dragons and why they aren't here anymore, aside from yours. That, you make it seem important. Because it is a matter of life and death, quite literally, and it goes beyond your actions here in Denmark. It involves the incineration of the entire human race. Quote. It does what? Olga growled loudly, prompting Cu to roll his eyes at her. We've all been knocked around on our ass before, lass. Getting angry about it is just gonna make you sloppy. With a shake of his head, he stepped back from her to let her stand back up. The director's hair was a mess, frazzled and with some of her bangs covering the left side of her face. Her coat was similarly crinkled, patches of snow nestled in between the folds. She could already feel cold water pooling inside of her boots from where snow had gotten inside from her repeated fallings. It was getting uncomfortable, and she felt less like she was learning and more like she was being physically abused for sport. This is pointless, she hissed out loud, glaring openly at the caster with all efforts to compose herself gone. Leveling a finger at him with her free hand, the man in question responded with a bored expression. You're not teaching me anything, you're not even making an effort to teach me anything. The druid looked down at his fingernails, unconcerned with her mounting rage. You've just said words that make it sound like you know what you're talking about, you even have all these other servants fooled with it, but that's not what this is. She accused, almost snarling, you're just doing this because you don't like me, isn't that right? An eyebrow was raised. That's exactly it. You know I've been struggling and you're just getting annoyed at it now, all that losing, and you're just gonna blame me for it all. Tell me all this nonsense about training me. She spat. You're just doing this for sick kicks, you just like watching me roll along the ground again and again, making sure I remember just how weak. Cu threw another punch, her eyes narrowed and she swung the shield at the fist, parrying it away. And you don't even respect me enough to listen to my grievances. You just try to ignore me at every turn. Do you not think my words are? You did it, pale rose. And you, Olga whirled on Nero, glaring at her and causing the blonde to blink. You continually horror-eyed did what? She paused, registering what the woman had cheered. Nero saw the opening and took it. You parried him with ease. The emperor proclaimed, with a mighty swing of your shield you deflected his fist. And you did so without even noticing. Her praise continued onwards, then pointed to herself, and that you immediately turned to me upon such a success is truly inspiring. Was my beauty something that caused you to further your efforts? Olga stared at her incomprehensibly for a few moments, then looked around at the other servants staring at her. I did it. Indeed. She jumped at the bellow of Leonidas, turning to see him looking at her from his position in front of the Norseman. Though your afterwords were odd, that was a fine parry for a beginner. He cupped his chin. It took some time to get you to that level, and I suspect you will have more failures before your next success, but your perseverance will carry you through. He pointed at her, then looked at the Norse. Take inspiration. After so many failures and setbacks, she still has the fire in her heart to snap at her attacker. I expect each and every one of you to have a glimmer of that inferno. Olga blinked several times, opening and closing her mouth as she tried to make sense of the shout from the lancer. I did it, she whispered to herself. You. Nero nodded proudly, her hands on her hips, and then were praised for your ability to remain irritated enough to not lose a step when interrupted. Quite the achievement. I did it, she was still repeating to herself, virtually ignoring Nero's words as she looked at the shield. Her arms felt sore, her hair was a mess and she didn't even want to be here anymore after all that effort. In spite of all that, she couldn't keep the smile from forming on her face. Nor did she make the effort to prevent it. I did it, nice work, CU praised for her side. And she was facing the sky once again. Can you do it again though? The caster challenged with a teasing grin. Olga glared at him, I wasn't even ready. So, CU snorted, you think your enemy is gonna wait until you're all good and ready? She bit back a retort at that, grumbling as she pulled herself back to her feet. Hey, that's a big cat. Tarkus. Comment broke her train of thought, turning her head to the saber in bewilderment. What? Her eyes squinted at the saber. What nonsense are you talking about now? Tarkus merely pointed in response, as their heads turned in the direction he indicated. See, that's a big cat. Quote. What in the shit, was CU's somewhat blunt comment as he stared at it, his arms slacking at his side. In the distance, perhaps a kilometer or so away as little more than a speck, there was indeed a rather towering and distinct shape of a large black cat with a small figure sitting atop it. I didn't know cats got that big. Tarkus continued on, oblivious to the rising tension around him. Turning towards Marie, he tilted his head. Did you know they got that big, Mrs. Marie? Marie shook her head in negative. They don't, not normally. Her attention was still upon the approaching cat. Ooh, Tarkus nodded several times. This must be one of those things that doesn't happen so often. He hummed, I know mother said about growth spurts but I didn't know they got that extreme. Do you think all their siblings are like that or are they really small? He looked around at the others. Would that be weird if they were all giant or are some of them tiny compared to that one? Who cares about that? Olga shouted as she went to the communicator on her wrist, pressing it up. What the heck are you doing? Why aren't you telling us about this? Munier's face popped up, blinking several times. Huh? How come you're? He looked to the side and frowned. But you're in a conversation with Da Vinci right now, so how are you able to? Da Vinci. Olga did a double take. What are you? Never mind that. What about the giant feline currently bounding towards us? Ah, yes. Munier nodded his head. Phantasmal in the readings accompanying it. They're a match for the readings of the incident in Rome, meaning it's that abyss, or whatever it is called. There's also a servant signature accompanying them, but this one is, He frowned. The spirit origin data is already registered in Chaldea's logs as a servant we've encountered before. Actually fairly recently too. What? Who? It looks like it was the berserker from Okeanos, although we never did find out his name in the end, I don't think. Munier scratched his head in puzzlement. At least, I don't think we did, although I might be wrong. Either way, they're approaching you at a decent speed. Wah! She scowled, then clicked off the communicator. Whatever they were saying about her being in a talk with Da Vinci right now could wait, she had something else to deal with. Alert positions, hold for my command. She nodded to Leonidas, the man sighing rather loudly. A shame, however I shall look forward to your tales of victory. The man loudly boasted, his form starting to split apart as he faded away, returning to Chaldea as the summoning was reversed. Alert positions only, you say? CU muttered as he stepped at her side, bringing forth his staff. They are riding a cat, not a dragon, but they were a hostile servant before. Olga replied back, therefore, we shall wait until they prove hostile. CU shrugged, if you say so. The giant black cat bounded closer to them with each passing second, its form growing larger and larger. More specific details soon became apparent. It wasn't that the cat was black, it was that, like the berserker Lancelot in Chaldea, it was shrouded in a dark cloud of smoke, hovering just above its fur and cloaking its entire being. The servants tensed as one. Then when the cat got to about 50 meters it slowed its acceleration right the way down, straightening its legs and leaning backwards to slow itself, upheaving snow as it glided forwards until it halted itself. The cat was certainly big, a touch smaller than the dragon they had encountered, but that still made it ludicrously large. It was also no normal cat, that much could be inferred from the glowing red eyes and huge fangs that protruded from its upper jaw and extended past its lower jaw. Which meant it was a giant saber-toothed tiger. The servant atop it seemed almost tame by comparison, horns jutting from the side of his head, orange hair and a stern frown upon his face as he stared at them. Are you a friend of the dragons or not? Olga called out to the servant at the top of her lungs, if you are, we will destroy you. Destroy. CU snickered, prompting a quick scowl from the director. Be at peace, warriors. You are in the presence of my herald and his companion. We are no allies of the dragons. Olga jumped in surprise at the voice which seemed to echo around them. The speaker was clearly female and her tone was somewhat authoritative and yet without strong emotion within it. Who? Her eyes narrowed, a spell that would carry the speaker's voice from afar. It was possible and most certainly the answer. Not an easy magecraft to master but not the most complicated either. Although it would be difficult to discern just how close the speaker in question was. Names shall be traded once you prove your worth before me. My herald will remain, await my arrival and prepare yourself for judgment. Hey, Olga shouted out indignantly, what is that supposed to mean? Who are you to be judging us? The wind did not respond to her, so her eyes fell upon the servant in question, and who are you supposed to be? The servant looked at her and opened his mouth to speak, Gargai. Olga's posture slackened instantly, her expression scrunched up in confusion. Don't worry, Miss Animasphere. Tarkus dutifully commented, I heard him loud and clear. He said, Gargai. The positive tone of the saber told her that he was smiling behind his helmet, even as she closed her eyes and pinched the bridge of her nose. Light giggles caught her ear, her head snapping to the direction of it and soon laid eyes upon Brynhildr as her lip was twitching upwards, then schooled itself in an effort to appear cool and emotionless once again. So, we gonna destroy them yet? Shut up. Oh yes, ma'am, destroyer ma'am. I will hit you. Going from parrying to hitting already. Nice to see you're so enthused by our lessons. Alsana nodded her head in satisfaction as she recalled her voice from the winds. It was always strenuous to do that and required a great deal of her focus. She turned to look down and then saw that both Sigurd and Gordon were looking up at her, the former with a blank expression and the latter with his expression hidden behind his helmet. The queen frowned lightly at the silent stares. Have you some comment to make? Sigurd pursed his lips. Did you not consider your language somewhat confrontational? He quizzed. An eyebrow was raised in response. I see no need to alter my way of speaking. I informed them that I would soon arrive and then we would trade names if I judged them to be helpful allies to our cause. Where would the confrontation arise? Gordon coughed into his hand. Telling someone to await judgment is normally used in less positive environments. Alsana looked between the two of them for a few moments, then looked up and straight ahead. I am certain all will be well. Sigurd and Gordon looked at each other, then shrugged their shoulders. Chapter 135, A Reunion. Da Vinci wasn't sure what she had been expecting from Calamate as she roughly explained the incineration of human history, in layman's terms. She had specifically done so to ensure that the dragon could understand it. She wasn't going to call him an idiot, because he wasn't if his curiosity and willingness to ask questions was any indication. What he was, however, was ignorant. Through no true fault of his own as she suspected he had no real way of understanding in the first place, the incineration wasn't just something that the average servant could understand and it was only through Gwendolyn's proclaimed experience in temporal irregularities that he had even understood a fraction of what had occurred before he came to Chaldea. Regardless, the caster explained everything they more or less knew about the incineration and what it actually was. The fracturing of human history in key sections with the end goal being of destroying it, or at least that is what they could infer so far. His eyes had directed themselves upwards as she made mention of the band of light in the atmosphere. He'd stared at that for a few moments before returning his attention to her. Calamate had been silent through the entire conversation, even as she explained the degradation of mystery and why the dragons had retreated to the reverse side of the world. Hence their complete lack of a presence in this time period before his arrival and why their numbers had dwindled out. He spoke not a word, nor did he look in her direction when she had finished speaking. The dragon simply stared out towards the horizon, his hand balled into a fist and his chin resting atop it. That was how he remained as he held the communicator in the free limb, still sat atop a rock and in a pose reminiscent of a thinker. What he was currently thinking of was something Da Vinci could only hazard a guess. She'd admit that a part of her was expecting him to shout in rage, to throw his magical energy around and call her a liar. That was only a very small part of her though. In truth this was the reaction she had been expecting most of all. Dead silence, neither words of denial nor pleas of desperate hope. Just silence. Calamate's body shifted, taking in a small lungful of air before he sighed out. A singularity. He spoke out after a few moments. I live in history that has already occurred and you are from the future where it had happened and intend to protect it. Yes, if my goal continues, even if it is not my aim, it will result in the extinction of the entire human race. Calamate spoke slowly, pausing to take in another lungful of air before he breathed out his next sentence, and even if I succeed, this era would be wiped out regardless, rendering all my hard work, all our struggles, pointless. Da Vinci didn't answer him that time, still staring at him with an expression devoid of emotion. Calamate turned to her, inclining his head slightly. Is that not right? If my people win, yours will die. Then we will soon follow when the history behind us collapses as well. Quote. Aren't you going to call me a liar? Why would I call you a liar? You have told nothing but the truth. Calamate bluntly replied, turning his head away. I could just be making it all up, stringing together a very elaborate story in order for you to lose heart and make it easier for us to defeat you. She pointed out in response, a light frown on her features. I could be doing that, using our built-up goodwill to my own advantage and playing you for a fool. Are you? The crimson eye at the side of Calamate's head darted in her direction, locking gazes with her and holding them for what felt like an eternity of silence. The two held the complete attention of the other for that brief moment. Da Vinci sharply turned her head, breaking eye contact with Calamate but not answering. Not that she needed to, however. Calamate knew the answer already. A low hum came from him. The hand propping up his chin fell down onto his lap and remained there while he brought the communicator around to his front. Looking down at the screen at Da Vinci. What do you think we did wrong? Da Vinci's attention returned to him. A curious eyebrow was raised in the direction of the dragon whose own attention was elsewhere, still locked onto the horizon. Pardon? Us. Calamate pointed to himself. Dragons, wyverns, worms, all of us. What do you think we did wrong? He looked down at her, tilting his head and speaking in a voice of complete innocence. I'm curious, be it my own land where the gods slaughtered us all without exception, ensuring we would never again be as we once were, or this land, where the very planet exiled us to another realm to remain forever. He exhaled, his eyes closing. I pondered it for many years after my escape of our fate. I wondered why we were killed. I believed I had found the answer recently, but the question that plagued me for so long had now returned. The eyes opened up again. So, what did we do to deserve this fate upon us? Where did we go wrong that we? Da Vinci thinned her lips. Not everything happens because people deserve it. Some good men deserve long life and instead die too soon. Some evil men deserve death and live long happy lives. That's the thing with the world. It was never fair to begin with. Everything that happens just happens. You can put it down to divine providence or to destiny, but the end result doesn't change. Bad things still happened. Bad things happen for no reason. Calamate commented, his voice devoid of feeling. That is the answer then, is it? The reason for it all is, there is no reason. My people are robbed of their chance again and again, just because. Quote. Yeah, why you? Calamate asked, eyes narrowed. Why humans? What made us so different? What made you so special that the world chose you over us? What was the difference? Where did you go right, where we went wrong? Humans are pretty weak, Da Vinci stated as if that explained everything. Calamate blinked once and then tilted his head. The woman raised a single finger to stop whatever else he was going to say. Homo sapiens were consistently the underdog in the situation. We're not all that strong, we're not all that durable, and compared to even the mundane predators in the world we don't stack up well. Calamate frowned. Weakness is a quality of power. Of course it is. When you're weak, you're aware of how easily you can lose. Be it your life or your next meal or something else you love. When you are weak, you know you can't go it alone, so you form little tribes to protect yourself better. Getting food is hard because the big prey are much stronger than you, so you find a method to kill them from a distance. You see what I am saying here? Weakness inspired you to try better. Da Vinci nodded. As a dragon, you're powerful. Absurdly powerful, so what have you to fear? What have you to change about yourself to fix any weakness you have? Her lips were pursed. You don't. Protecting yourself is a simple matter of opening your mouth and spewing fire, so you don't need to form groups. Prey, yours physically touch as a phantasmal can come, so what do you need to worry about prey being stronger than you? Quote. But that is, dragons are. You might have weak individuals, but you are a strong species. We had strong individuals, but are a weak species. That's the difference. We have plenty of reasons to keep pushing and bettering ourselves, whereas you didn't. A human will understand they are weak from the moment they are born to the moment they die, acutely understanding that anything can kill them. For a dragon, what do they have to fear from anything but another dragon? I'm changing us now, though. Calamate argued, pressing a hand against his chest. I'm working to make us different. To have us better ourselves. Because you know of your own weakness. As you said, the gods killed your people, so you know you're not stronger than they are. You know what can kill you and what to watch out for, so you're better than most, but the list of things you had to fear is still pretty small. If I were to put it another way, humans are constantly aware of the fear of dying, so that propels them onwards. Then our crime was we weren't scared enough. Those who come from weakness understand the value of strength. Those from strength cannot comprehend weakness. That was simply it. In the grand scheme of things, humans were chosen because we keep pushing onwards to understand and correct any weaknesses we have. Your weaknesses were few and far between. In effect, you were too good for your own good. Too powerful for our own good. Calamate parroted the words back to her, mulling them over in his head. We were too strong and that never inspired us to change. Or so it went for my people in this world. Pretty much. Da Vinci nodded in affirmation. I can't make judgments for your people back home, but what do you think they would have done? Calamate was silent, considering his experiences for a few moments before he exhaled. Nothing. I am what I am because of my experiences, but my entire people could not think as I have. Maybe we would be different or maybe we wouldn't. Another gentle sigh. I suppose it is not going to do much good right now, is it? Da Vinci hummed in response, her lips pursed. So, what are you going to do now? Now, Calamate muttered before nodding once, rising into a standing position. Now, I'm going to find a way to save us. If the world deems us wrong, if history wants us dead, I will reject them both. Our people came before the world was formed, from when time did not exist. What do I care for the demands of concepts I am older than? He turned to Da Vinci. My answer is that my quest remains unchanged. My ideal is now further from my grasp but will perhaps never be as close again. If I did not take this chance, this impossible hope for my people to finally better ourselves, when would another emerge? Da Vinci responded with a mirthful huff. I suspect it wouldn't. So, you're still going along with it then? I am. It will make us enemies, but I cannot weigh mankind's survival against the impossible future for my people when it stands before me. I'm not condoning you, it's nothing for me to complain about. It really is an impossible chance that will probably never happen again. She smirked. I'd say reaching for that goal and declaring you will do something like defying the world is actually very human of you. You think so? In my current state I am probably part human due to the soul inside me. Calamate commented as he ran his claws over his heart in an idle fashion. I am curious about something though. If you can answer me, I'll talk for as long as we have time. Do you not have other concerns at present though? Calamate ventured. I would not seek to demand all your time. Hey, who do you think you're talking to? Da Vinci cracked a confident smile, pointing at herself with her thumb. This universal genius can do whatever she likes with her time and still do everything she planned to. If you say so. Calamate nodded in acceptance. I would like to know about the one who leads the Chaldeans here. White Flower. Da Vinci's expression faltered for a moment, then she rolled her lips inwards to muffle her laughter, raising one hand to cover her mouth as she turned her head away while the other was held towards the screen. Calamate stared at her laughing face for a few moments, then found himself frowning at her continued display of amusement. Have I said something amusing to you? No. Da Vinci spoke in between chuckles, muffling her laughter as best she could and trying to control it so that she could continue speaking. White Flower. Another snicker followed the words, the woman leaning forwards and cupping her face with her hands. Why you said it with such a serious face that I couldn't. The dragon tilted his head and waited until she had stopped laughing, which went on for a longer time frame than he had actually been expecting. As her laughter died down, she wiped away the glimmers of tears around her eyes and flicked the water from her fingers. Sorry about that, she apologized, still with mirth in her voice as she returned her attention to him. As for that, yes. White Flower, or as well call her here in Chaldea, Director Olga Marie Animosphere. Calamate blinked once. I thought her name was White Flower. Nero calls her Pale Rose, so that must have been where you heard it from. He said nothing for a few moments, then tilted his head. But if her name isn't White Flower, why would she be called that? It's a nickname. It's cute and I personally find it highly amusing. Da Vinci explained with a winning smile. Nickname, a little name you give to people you have closer bonds with. You might care for them more than others, so you come up with a name that's a little more intimate than you otherwise would call them. For instance, someone I know calls me Leo, as opposed to my full name. She raised a single finger. but he's the only one allowed to do that, though. Before you get any ideas about calling me it, Calamate hummed in response, names given to people you are close with. So people you care for more than others, is what you mean. Yep, I see. Thank you, Vinci. The woman raised an eyebrow. Already? That was quick. It is faster than saying your full name and it feels different. Calamate admitted, resting his free arm on his lap. Strange, but calling you something like that feels correct, somehow. Well, I'm glad to know you care so much about me. Da Vinci grinned back at him before schooling her expression. As for the earlier point, why do you want to know about Director Animosphere? That prompted a noise of confusion from the dragon. Is it strange to want to learn about my opposite? We both fight for the same goal, though our desires are different. Therefore I would like to know what she is like as an individual. How different is she from me? When I meet her, I doubt there will be much time to discuss such things. So you would like to know now, to get a good understanding of your rival, so to speak. Rival, yes, my rival. The dragon nodded his head at the word. It felt appropriate. She is my rival and I wish to learn who she is. Turning his head to Da Vinci, he let out a low placating growl, though if you do not wish to tell me, then you don't have to. It is not something I will force you to. No, it's fine, I suppose. Da Vinci waved her hand at him. If you just want to know what she is like as a person, I suppose I can tell you that much. Is it acceptable? Calamate tilted his head. I did not wish to pressure you for information you cannot give me. I suppose I might get in a tiny bit. She pinched her fingers together with just a millimeter of space in between them to emphasize her point. Of trouble for talking to you in the first place without telling anyone else. But I would consider this something worth far more than a lecture, she assured him, noticing what she imagined to be the distressed face on him. You care an awful lot for your enemies, don't you? Well, just because we are on opposite sides does not mean we cannot treat each other equally. You have your own reasons and I have mine. There is no need for this to be a case of hatred. He grimaced, snout curling down in distaste as he turned away. I have done enough of that. It's shocking how easy it is to kill out of anger, and for that to be your singular motivation. I was wondering why you felt so strongly about the wyverns in France. Da Vinci muttered back, cupping her chin between her fingers and giving the dragon a scrutinizing look. So, that's how it was for you, was it? Had it not been for my sisters, I don't know if I would have gotten to this point. Calamate admitted with a shrug of his shoulders. It is an odd thing to consider. I had once thought all were equal, but their experiences were different from mine from the very beginning. They could see more of the world than I could, and even you can. He waved his hand at Da Vinci. You see even more than them. But I would still treat you the same, even as an enemy, for the most part. That's just called having respect for someone. Da Vinci explained, nodding her head in understanding. You can see your siblings have more wisdom than you and you can respect their knowledge. Your enemies have their own motivations just as you do, so you respect those reasons. It is not a bad way of thinking, she assured him, giving a half smile. It makes you, well, it makes me a little bit sad. She pouted, crossing her arms. Why couldn't you be some revenge-crazed murderer? I wouldn't feel so bad about the idea of you dying then. Calamate laughed. The noise sounded more like a jeep starting, but the dragon laughed. The noise escaped him easily, placing a hand on his chest. I am sorry for disappointing you then. The mirth died down, tilting his head. Speaking with you I feel a little bigger than I was before. He tapped a single claw atop his chest, like it isn't as hollow. Speaking with you has been an experience for me as well. She pointed at him, and don't go apologizing for the way you are. It might make me feel a little bad, but you're still contributing to the incineration of humanity in some aspects. Can't let that go on now, can we? Of course not. Calamate agreed easily, and as Chaldea represents a clear and present threat to my dream, I cannot let them continue to live either. He stated somewhat casually, that is the way it is. You have your own motives and I have mine. So long as we understand one another, there is no need for disrespect on either side. How nice. Da Vinci giggled, coughing into her hand and softening her expression. Now then, as for Director Animosphere. She's a bit temperamental, exceedingly demanding for the best, prone to panic and sometimes is a little too unaware of how people really think about her. She also has a nasty habit of comparing herself to her father. I say nasty because personally I hate the man. Calamate's brow ridges rose up, his eye on his forehead dilated considerably as he stared at the woman. He hadn't been expecting those string of words, not least of all the blunt statement that she hated the Olga human's progenitor. But, Da Vinci continued on, her expression shifting to be more genuine, I don't think you will find someone in Chaldea more dedicated to this than her. It might be a point of pride for her, but I think she really does believe in it. She looked to the dragon, explaining further, the future, I mean. Under that tough exterior of hers, she really is the type of girl that cares. She might struggle to show it at times, thinking the worst instead, but she does care. Calamade was silent for a few moments, nodding his head up and down as his eyes flickered around to indicate he was thinking. So that is what she is like then, he simply stated after a few moments. One who does believe in the future and cares for her people. Yep. That's good. Calamade exhaled, drumming his fingers on his leg, that is good. I wasn't sure what to expect, but, for one who fights for their own future, that is good. I look forward to meeting her then. He nodded to Da Vinci, you can tell her about me, if you have not already. It is only fair that we learn about one another. You aren't concerned about your true name. I introduced myself to a dragon slayer within the first few seconds of speaking with him. Calamade bluntly replied, I would introduce myself to all without concern. She will learn my name from you or from me, I will introduce myself once again regardless of what you choose. You're a little carefree, aren't you? Am I? Calamade blinked. I think I might be rather, he frowned, lifting his hand up, when I think of the future, my body tingles. My hand sometimes shakes and I don't know why. That's a different sort of stress, although it could also be excitement for the future. Da Vinci pointed out, but I was going to tell them anyway, but it's nice to know you accept me doing that and give me permission. Makes me feel a little less guilty. A pause, I probably wasn't going to feel too guilty anyway, but taking advantage of your naivety would feel a little underhanded to me. Calamade merely hummed in response, his claws raking against his chin as he continued to think to himself. If you say so, as you can imagine we didn't have much before the flame. Da Vinci pursed her lips, a curious expression fluttering across her features before she opened her mouth. What was it like before the flame? She could tell the question caught Calamade by surprise, judging by the way he abruptly jolted and turned to face her. I've heard a lot about it, and from what you're telling me, it basically made the world what it is, but you're older than it. So what was it like? Calamade was silent, staring at Da Vinci with an indiscernible look upon his reptilian face before he closed his eyes and exhaled. It was different. He shrugged his shoulders, that is the best way I can explain it. Everything was different. It was a world without disparity, all were equal and identical. We did not have individuals and we did not change our number. Eternal and everlasting since, he made a noise of puzzlement, I have a perfect recollection of everything that ever occurred to me and I have no knowledge of a time where I did not exist. None of us did, before the flame we simply were. Da Vinci cupped her chin, that would mean you arrived at the same time the planet was formed, and it underwent no changes for the entirety of that period. The very first form of life for who knows how long, except the world didn't have anything, no concepts of comparison or the like, a world without change. She was silent for a few moments, then made a small noise, sounds completely alien to me. Also more than a little boring. We understood neither boredom nor excitement. Calamade countered, although his own tone of voice was lacking in intensity. We simply existed and that was how we, I will not say, lived, because there was neither life nor death. Da Vinci made a face, hang on a moment, how can you exist if there is no concept of life? My form before the change was made of stone. Calamade simply explained, we all were, beings of stone and, after the flame we became alive, so to speak. Before it was akin to, I cannot explain it well. Perhaps I don't know enough words or perhaps I just cannot explain it to someone who wasn't there at all. No, I get it, you were elementals. Da Vinci hummed to herself, giving the dragon a new look, elementals who looked exactly like dragons, or you were dragons that had the same characteristics of elementals. Obviously not anymore, but at the same time you were, Now that is interesting. So, the flame comes and what do you feel? Change. Calamade bluntly responded, everything just changed. It was something we became aware of. We had no emotions and were suddenly bombarded with awareness of the entire planet. Fear, joy, happiness and anger was overwhelming. The panic was the first to set in as we tried to understand what had been done to us, but we never arrived at any conclusion. I imagine so. You were basically an entire race of newborns. That was another thing that happened. Births. New dragons. Calamate looked at her. Can you imagine it? Our number was unchanging since the beginning of all, and then suddenly more of our people appeared. There were differences, though. Some lacked our stone scales and had different ones, and then others had 2 wings instead of 4. Calamate growled under his breath. The first of the new dragons, though, was scaleless. Pale skin and full of resentment. He wanted our scales but could never have them, but I don't know what he did, but he helped the flame kin fashion a method of destroying us. I see. Few survived. Had it not been for the actions of the light kin offspring, we would have all perished. Calamate fell silent for a moment, then shook his head. But this is not what you asked. As for before the flame, I don't know. As for after the flame, it was a jumbled mess. We understood nothing and had nothing to learn from. No examples to follow and no method to understand the world. The flame kin attacked during this confusion. The dragon was silent for a few more moments, then exhaled. After my escape I drifted the world, moving from place to place, and there is a reason they call me the Dragon of Calamity. Without knowing it, my heart burned with anger and jealousy towards humans and gods that they lived while we died. So I would see towns and cities and I just despised seeing them. So you destroyed them. Her voice was blunt and her tone bereft of judgment. It was a simple statement of fact, but the dragon still flinched at the words. I did. I destroyed them for the sake of destroying them because I just hated seeing it. I didn't want to see it. See what my people died too. See what was built atop our graves. So he shrugged his shoulders. I burned and destroyed without ending. Then I encountered the one of dark and he did something to me. It was as though a hole in my chest was filled and my body warped overnight. It was painful, but when the pain left me, I felt different. So I lingered in the land a little longer, trying to make sense of these feelings. Did you? No, I was shot from the sky by a giant and then killed by a human. Calamate bluntly stated, not sounding too distraught by his end. I did get this chance to make sense of these emotions though. So I will not destroy without meaning ever again, and my envy of humanity has faded. We have our chance now. If it fails, it will be my fault for not being strong enough. All right then. Da Vinci nodded her head several times, drumming her fingers on the desk and then turning back to the device she was working on. I'm almost done with this, so I'll soon be heading up somewhere we can't speak. So don't feel lonely if I'm not talking to you. There are others I can speak with. Maybe. But there's only one universal genius who can bestow her wisdom upon you. You like to congratulate yourself a lot, don't you? Of course I do. Someone has to, and what's wrong with a little confidence in your own abilities, mister? I'm going to reject the world. She joked with a teasing smile. Calamate let out a sigh and shook his head from side to side. I cannot say you are wrong. This has been an interesting talk. I hope we will speak again before the end. I think that would be all right as well. Da Vinci nodded her head in agreement, then pointed at him. I still hope you lose, though. A pause. Also, you need to guess what I painted. Calamate gave a mirthful huff. I hope you lose as well. He countered, earning a roll of the eyes from Da Vinci, and I will make a guess, as soon as I can. He looked down at the device in his hands. How do I work this? The button in the top right corner is blue. Press that gently to turn it off. Ah, I see. Calamate nodded his head, moving a claw and extending a single finger towards the glowing blue button, halting just shy of touching it. Until we speak again. Until then. He pressed the button, shutting off the communicator and rising up from his seated position. That was a long conversation and one that he felt was very fruitful. There was a clarity of mind about him now. The world fit together nicely in front of him. Perhaps he would encounter stress as he built up his kingdom, but for now it was simply a matter of winning the battle. He could focus on that simply enough. Turning around as he strode in the direction of the arctree, the communicator gently cupped in his left hand so as to not allow any damage to come upon it. He didn't know if Akal had figured out what the contraption did, but that didn't matter to him so much. Calamate was glad he got to speak with someone like Vinci before the end, win or lose. Olga watched as the servant atop the cat continued to pace around in front of the group, still keeping a respectful distance, but their nature was still dubious enough. This is stupid, Olga bluntly stated after a few moments, earning a curious glance from Marie to her right as she pinched the bridge of her nose. Months of Chaldea encountering lucid, if slightly unhinged, berserkers, and the one time we encounter one in the field they are actually behaving as the class dictates they should. Marie gave her a sympathetic smile, reaching out and gently patting her on the back in a reassuring way. The fact the director didn't even attempt to spurn the physical attention was either proof that she was getting a little better or proof that she just didn't care anymore. One of the two, at least. I'm sure that whoever spoke with us over the wind is going to explain everything, Marie suggested, giving the berserker and the large cat a glance from the corner of her eye. The beast gave off a strange aura and she'd noticed Brynhildr had been on edge ever since it arrived. The same with Torin, the pair of them had been holding their weapons a touch tighter ever since they laid eyes upon the cat. She hadn't actually spoken with either of them about it, however. Could be worse, I say. Cu mumbled behind them, leaning on his staff and maintaining his focus on the cat and servant. At least they ain't dragons, we would know they were hostile if they were. That was a silver lining, Olga supposed. Her hand lowered and was placed upon her hip as her face turned more calculating. So how long do you suppose we would have to wait? Cu made a thoughtful face for a few moments, then shrugged his shoulders. No idea. Launching your voice over the wind ain't easy, and judging by the fact we've been here waiting for a good few minutes with no sign of anyone except Tonguebiter over there and his feline friend, I'd say we'll be waiting a good few minutes more. Rolling her eyes, Olga looked down at her communicator on her wrist and activated it, this time blinking as instead of Munier it was Romani's face that showed up. What are you doing? I thought I ordered you to bed. Romani nodded his head up and down, fighting back a yawn as he rubbed his eyes. I know, and I got a couple of hours sleep, so that's better than nothing. He added on, then nodded away from the woman and to somewhere else, but Carrie was saying that Leo called the control room and said she had finished working on the signal amplifier and was heading up to the command room now. Olga raised an eyebrow, and how do you factor into this? Romani slumped. Leo initially thought I was lazing about in my room and then came to get me. Reaching up, he scratched his cheek and gave an awkward smile. Then she found out I was actually sleeping and told me to just stay in bed. And you are not currently in bed because... I figured being in bed right now was a pretty bad thing to be doing. He exhaled, looking down for a moment before he shook his head and refocused on the screen. Besides, I got some sleep, so I'm all good to go. At least until we make contact with Fujimaru-kun, then I can rest easier than I was doing. He looked over the top of the screen to somewhere else. Munier was telling me about what happened and I looked over the readings, so I'm more or less up to speed. Olga grunted. Where is Pharaoh's? Hey. Romani made a noise as he suddenly found his personal space invaded by the aforementioned caster, the woman leaning over the doctor and grinning at the director. I had a look over the encounter and reviewed the footage. Very well, your assessment. Never heard of a call before in my life, she bluntly stated, shrugging once. The design that was recorded though. Definitely an everlasting dragon, which is really strange because there shouldn't have been any of those left in the world after their war with the gods. Well, except for Seath the Scaleless, but he definitely wouldn't be anything like that. She waved her hand dismissively. So, weaknesses would be lightning miracles, those were what the gods used to. We were made aware of that much. Olga cut off the caster. The woman blinked once and then looked to Romani. The man shrugged his shoulders and the pair returned their attention to the director. We have a general plan on how to engage the servant again. What I need to be made aware of is if we are being approached or not. We made contact with another servant, the berserker from the third singularity, and they are awaiting the arrival of another group of servants or magi. That is, a lot of information to take in. Pharaohs muttered back before shaking her head. All right then. Expanding the sensors, she leaned over Romani. The man made a noise of discomfort as she pressed against his shoulder and started to fiddle with the keyboard without even addressing the man whose job it actually was in the first place. NNND, there we go. Grinning, she leaned back and rested her left arm on the back of Romani's chair. Seriously, Romani mumbled under his breath. I could have done that. He leaned forwards and frowned. Yeah, you've got several servant signatures incoming from the north, but... He raised his brows. You've got an exact copy of the cat thing in front of you along with what looks like a couple hundred humans as well. Olga widened her eyes, feeling a faint glimmer of hope swell inside her. Humans, you mean to say more survivors? Could be. Romani nodded his head, his own expression getting lighter. With the readings we're getting on the Saint graph of the approaching servants, they aren't all that weak either, and all of them have a reading of divinity of some nature or another. Although one of them looks a little odd, he thinned his lips. It seems close enough to the abyss readings we got in Rome, but it doesn't appear as unstable. Olga cupped her chin, frowning in thought as she recalled what they knew of it. Abyss, that was what they referred to as the dark soul gone out of control, I believe. She nodded to herself, which would mean that a more stable reading would imply that this is perhaps one of the original holders before the soul became what we saw in Rome. Romani shrugged, then looked towards Pharaoh's behind him for any suggestions. The caster blinked as she suddenly found herself the center of attention. I don't know anything about the dark soul, she admitted unashamedly. You'd be better off asking one of the resident gods we have. Olga sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. Fine, we will assume as much for now. She lowered her hand, but the readings you speak of mean that there were indeed other servants summoned much further north and have been working their way down south. So, we might get some reinforcements after all. You cheered with a smirk, looking down at the director as he leaned over her, and if they're coming from dragon territory with a couple hundred survivors, then they're good at their jobs or very skilled not to get detected. He looked up at the pacing tiger and snorted, my guess is on the first one though. Same here, Romani nodded along. St. Graph readings identified them as two sabers, a berserker and a caster. Combined with the berserker in front of you, that would make for a grand total of 5 servants in one group. He made a noise, and considering they would be without a master, there must be someone pretty charismatic or something there. Olga blinked. How do you figure that? He's not wrong. You gave a begrudging nod to the doctor. With most of us, we have different methods of doing stuff as we all come from different time periods. Depending on what class we get summoned as, our personality can undergo a radical change. He grimaced, like if I was summoned as a berserker, I wouldn't be nearly as reasonable and would have charged straight up north and killed anyone who tried to stop me. 5 servants working together well enough to keep that many people safe. Someone knows what they're doing. Then we will have to wait until they arrive. Olga nodded her head, then looked over to where Torin was still glaring at the berserker servant and the large cat. Tell him about the news and get him to stop glaring. The last thing we need is for us to be starting needless fights with potential allies. Considering all the ground behind them had been covered and, barring any more stubborn servants like Torin, there was a good chance they were going to bolster their forces considerably after this encounter. All they needed to do was wait. How far away are they? About a mile or so. Romani replied as he squinted, maybe a little further. At their current rate they'll be with you, within the hour. He guessed, I suppose all we need to do is wait for resident genius appears. That, Romani finished with a roll of his eyes. Both he and Pharaoh's turned around as Da Vinci burst into the room with a small metallic box under her arm. Ah, you're here as well. Rather than appearing off-put, Da Vinci instead grinned wider at the appearance of Pharaoh's in the command room. You can bear witness to my latest invention that should break through some of the interference, she boasted, moving towards the terminal and placing the box down. I modified one of the ICDs in order to try and boost the signal. So it should work to get in touch with Fujimaru and the others. There was a pause. It might take a while, but it should work. Excellent. Olga nodded her head and spoke in a pleased tone of voice. Perhaps we shall finally be able to get a report as to why they failed to make a call back to Chaldea. HMMM. Da Vinci nodded her head. In the meantime, Director, I believe you lost the backup communicator that you were sent out with. The woman mentioned almost casually as she worked to set up the device on the terminal, flipping it open and pressing several buttons. Then turned to flash Olga a carefree smile. The director blinked once. Excuse me. She made an indignant noise. I would never. She trailed off, feeling the usual weight of the disc in her left pocket was now suspiciously empty. But that doesn't. She trailed off, widening her eyes as she slapped her hand over the empty pocket and looked around. How can the fight with the servant? Marie blinked, but that was hours ago. She stated with a raised eyebrow, then looked to Da Vinci, and how do you know she lost it? All our equipment has tracking systems built into them. Da Vinci explained as she turned back to the equipment. It helps in case we lose something or need to monitor the location of anyone in the singularity. She paused for a moment, then chuckled. It also helps to know the communicator isn't in the hands of the person you sent it out with when they actually call you up. She let the words settle for a few moments, then darted her eyes away to see the heads of everyone had swiveled in her direction. Excuse me. Olga raised an eyebrow, looking at Da Vinci in a dumbfounded manner. What do you mean, called us? Well, they called me specifically. Da Vinci explained with a shrug of her shoulders. They hit the priority message by mistake and we got to chatting. You have been in dialogue with one of our enemies and you're mentioning this now. Well, I only finished my conversation with them about 10 minutes ago. Da Vinci replied as if that explained anything. There wasn't much of an opportunity to inform you without hanging up and calling you, and that would be incredibly rude, especially since it was a rather stimulating conversation. What the heck did you even talk about? Romani asked with an utterly baffled face, leaning back and looking the caster up and down. And how long did you talk? A couple of hours. Olga made a strangled noise and Marie's brows rose. Pharaohs let out an impressed whistle and Romani just sighed and rubbed his face. And we talked about the Renaissance. Da Vinci explained. We also talked about all sorts of other stuff like paintings. She snorted. He had no idea who I was and he asked if I was a painter. Olga opened her mouth and closed it several times. Wow, what does that have to do with anything in the Singularity? Quite a lot, actually. Da Vinci shrugged as she stepped away. We got to talking about motives and his are actually very understandable. Of course we can't allow them to go through but they're very understandable. Marie tilted her head, now slightly interested. What are his motives? Da Vinci gave a hum. He wants to build a kingdom for dragons. She explained, imagine human society, but instead of humans it was dragons. Was the additional information she added on. That is basically what this entire Singularity is about. He's clearing the land of the natives to make his own little settlement. It's basically a repeat of colonialism except this time, humans are the natives and the dragons are the settlers. Olga opened and closed her mouth several times. That is, what? That can't be. She furrowed her brows, squinting at Da Vinci in complete confusion. Is that, are you being serious? Oh, yes. Da Vinci nodded once. Like I said, understandable motives. He's a dragon who wants to make something of his people. That's all he really is. But he can't. Olga blurted out. The age of mystery is vanishing and he exists within a singularity. Anything he created here would be crushed by the world or wiped out as history itself collapses. His goal is utterly impossible. Da Vinci cut her off with a knowing look. I told him as much as well. You know what he said to me. I reject a world that says my people must die, or along those lines. She gave a genuinely impressed smile, quite a character and surprisingly charming. Were you flirting with the enemy? Romani asked with an odd tone of voice as he stared at the woman. Da Vinci merely grinned teasingly at him. Ah, are you jealous? Wah no, you don't need to be so bashful, Romani. Da Vinci rolled her eyes at him, then loosened her posture, and no. I would say his demeanor was, it was more like educating someone. That's why he was so interested in learning about the Renaissance and the communication disc I found. She grinned, he was actually incredibly praising of my abilities. Did you at least find out anything useful? Olga asked, running a hand over her face and trying to make sense of the reveals and opting for a calmer approach. I did, actually. Da Vinci nodded her head. He told me his true name, although he didn't care about it in the least. Telling me he told a dragon slayer the exact same thing before they fought. He also appears to have some understanding of Camelot as well, telling me he was going to build his own version. She leaned back, crossing her arms. I think it curious that he was ignorant to human society as a whole but was aware of Camelot specifically. That, Olga opened her mouth, then closed it. That was actually a good point. Someone who had no knowledge of the Renaissance and, did you tell him your true name? Yes. She bit down a response to that, and he still asked if you were a painter. Indeed. That was just baffling to her, aware of a very little about humans except Camelot. Which meant someone spoke of it. Wait a moment here. Romani cupped his chin. So someone tells him about Camelot and the lancer you fought on your first night. He turned in his chair, pressing several buttons on the keyboard. Her style of fighting was almost a match for King Arthur in Fuyuki and going by the same style of magical energy distribution and dragon core. He cupped his chin. King Arthur was said to have a sword and a spear as well. Excalibur being the sword for when they are a saber and the other weapon would be Rongomyniad. Olga paled slightly. King Arthur, again. It is as possible a guess as any. Romani admitted with a wince. It could very well be a stretch, but it fits all the pieces of the puzzle really conveniently. Forget that for the moment. The true name of the servant you spoke with. Yes, he called himself Calamate. Da Vinci nodded her head. Considering I have never heard of him before, she trailed off, making gestures with her hands. One would assume he's from the other world as well. Olga inferred with a nod of the head, thinning her lips. I will question the servants, ask around Chaldea and see if there are any who recognize the name. Calamate is the dragon of calamity. Pharaohs rattled off immediately, bringing the attention onto her, one of the more famous dragons purely because they had a name. Right up there with Seath but for entirely different reasons. Mainly because Calamate was regarded as the last survivor of the true everlasting dragons from the Age of Ancients. He was killed some time in the distant past for me, and his body was cut up and forged into weapons and armor for some cultists or something like that. Quote. Very well then. Olga coughed, surprised at how easy the information was to get. What else does his legend state? Oh, that's it, Pharaohs replied. He was a dragon from the Age of Ancients who survived into the Age of Fire. I guess, the person who killed them isn't really mentioned at all, and all I know is that the gods didn't go near him, although the story changed depending on which kingdom I was visiting at the time. Either Calamate was too skilled at hiding for their hunters, or he was so strong that they could not beat him in open combat, or they just didn't care enough to hunt him down. A shrug. Like I said, it changes from story to story. A couple rumors here and there that he became an abyss dragon, but no one ever confirmed that, so, Pharaohs waved her hand, I wouldn't put too much stock in that one. Then what we know is that we might be facing King Arthur, again, a dragon no one has ever heard of, a dragon that is known but is either one who specializes in escaping, is strong enough to challenge gods, or just isn't worth the effort in battling to begin with. Olga listed off, her eye twitching with each point she made. More or less, Pharaohs casually remarked with a shrug of the shoulders, her lip twitching upwards. Is this how you folks usually do things around here? Because it sounds remarkably dangerous most of the time. The caster then made a noise of dismissal. Not that I really have room to complain about it, though. I usually went around from place to place without putting much attention into learning about things, so I was pretty much in the dark wherever I went. It's actually how I work on the regular. That isn't. Olga cut herself off, pinching the bridge of her nose and exhaling. Never mind. She lowered the hand and placed it on her hips. We'll think more on that later. She looked to where the other servants were. We'll wait until everyone forms up and then regale the new servants with this information as well. If they are unaware, there is no sense in repeating the same set of information twice over within so short a period of time. All right then, Da Vinci commented from behind her, then tilted her head. So what are you going to do now then? With that servant camped out in front of us, there is little chance of us getting past them without a fight. Olga stated, exhaling and looking back out towards the servant in question. In addition to this, with the news that there are perhaps 200 refugees heading directly towards us, headed by what looks like a number of potentially allied servants. They are coming to us, so there is no reason to move. Turning her head away from the communicator, she stared out across the Norse they had accompanying them. At best, it would be easy to use this time to rest and recuperate. The people with us can exercise or something, and we can assign servants to watch until they arrive. She turned her head to look out for Cu, then squinted at him. He can establish a quick territory in the event of a situation, but that is beside the point at present. Olga returned her focus to Da Vinci. That is what we shall do. Then her eyes narrowed, and if you ever make contact with a hostile servant again, for any reason, you will immediately inform Chaldea, not whenever you feel like it or after you finish your conversation, in order to avoid being rude. She pointed at the woman. You might gather information all you wish. I encourage it, as it has been somewhat useful, but it is not so trivial a matter you can simply drop it into a conversation like that. Da Vinci stared back at her, then nodded her head once. I'm probably going to talk with him again at some point. He also asked about you. Quote. He what? Yep. He wanted to know all about the type of person who was fighting against him. Olga blanched. What did you tell him? Da Vinci regarded her with a blank face for a few moments before she made a small noise. I told him what we do at Chaldea, more or less, and that you were someone fighting for the future of humanity. She smiled. His response was that he was very happy with the type of person you were. Quote. What? The caster nodded her head repeatedly, leaning on the desk. Is that odd? He said he looked forward to when he gets to meet you. Maybe I can call him again and you can speak to one another. I don't want to talk with him. Olga scowled. His motives are irrelevant. He is a danger to all of human history, so he needs to be eliminated. I know that. I told him as much myself. Da Vinci casually remarked. I told him repeatedly that I hoped he would lose. Really? Romani looked up at her in surprise. And he just kept speaking with you after that? He said he would find it odd if I wasn't wishing for him to lose. Da Vinci replied with a half shrug. He's that sort of person, or dragon I should say. Quote. Whatever. Olga stated after a few moments, closing her eyes and shaking her head. Keep me appraised of any new developments regarding Fujimaru's team and immediately alert me if Da Vinci tries to make contact with hostile servants to discuss the weather or whatever else she intends to speak with them about. With that, she turned the communicator off. The waiting wasn't as bad as had been expected, although the presence of the berserker pacing back and forth across the giant cat was still a present source of concern. The lack of hostile movement for nearly half an hour managed to soothe some of the worst warriors amongst the group, convincing them that it was just going to stand there. That being said, both Torin and Brynhildr never once parted their gaze from the beast. "Oi," Cu called out, his voice spreading out across the camp and bringing the entire attention towards him. The servants who weren't on watch turned to face him and stared at him. The man turned to face them and waved his hand. "They're approaching us now." Olga got up from where she was seated, and started to walk over to him. As she moved, she looked to her side and raised her brow as instead of Nero or Marie walking by her side it was Brynhildr. The lancer was moving at a rapid pace with an apprehensive expression plastered upon her instead of the usual cold features. From the looks of things, the woman was also fidgeting as well. "The servant has not made a move in the time they have been pacing around," Olga stated with a wave of the hand towards the large cat and berserker still sitting atop it. "Is there something about them that has you continually on edge?" "It is not that." Olga now did a double take at the nervous and almost maidenly voice of the lancer, actually stopping walking and staring at the woman. "It's just that, I feel a beating in my heart, a sense of tension that won't go away." Red dusted her cheeks and she let out a faint moan. "Ah, I feel this, I know this feeling." Olga stared at him for a few seconds before she blurted out, "What is the matter with you?" Brynhildr wet her lips, still staring out towards the gradually enlarging figures of the mob approaching them. "I know this, I know what this is." Her eyes widened, her mouth parted and she felt her heartbeat quicken. "He's here." It started out as a whisper and gradually grew louder and louder as she repeated the words to herself. "He's here. He's here. He's here." It devolved into a shout by the end of it, Olga actually stepping backwards and Cu from up ahead turning around and raising an eyebrow towards the shouting woman. "The heck are you bellowing about?" he called out to them, placing a hand on his hip and tilting his head to the side. "What are you trying to woe?" He widened his eyes as the woman twirled the spear in her hands, narrowly avoiding striking Olga in the back of the head and buffeting the wind that it flopped down in his face. Olga herself released a panicked cry of alarm and fell down to the side as the lancer rushed past her. The aftershock of her sudden burst of speed had her falling backwards into the snow. Cu rolled to the side in order to avoid being run over by the lancer as she charged down at full speed. The woman blurred past him without even registering his cries of alarm and moved full pelt towards the approaching group. Olga made an annoyed noise as she flicked her hair back and glared at the back of the charging lancer, then squinted her eyes and watched as a servant towards the head the approaching pack separated from the group and advanced towards the advancing lancer. Despite the situation, the servant had his arms spread wide with his pale-colored cape fluttering in the wind almost as if he was welcoming an old friend. Then Brynhildr thrust her spear towards his head. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.